Chapter 324. With the appearance of the fish tank, the huge courtyard finally had one more permanent resident. This anglerfish's head was very big, so when the little guy asked what it should be called, she decisively gave it a name, Big Head. It was especially vivid. At the same time, it sounded like it complemented the two words, Big Cat, Big Head. Because her vocabulary was too small, after the little one whispered the name in her mouth, she said with a happy face, Big Head sounds good. This is Big Cat, this is Big Head. Fish, you'll be called Big Head from now on. Okay? Big Head was a deep-sea fish and had never been in contact with humans, so it naturally didn't understand what the little one was saying. However, although it didn't understand what the little one was saying, the big cat next to it understood. So, it immediately rolled its eyes in a very human-like way. It was obviously a cat, but its eyes revealed a very disdainful feeling. Such a proud performance in the eyes of she naturally couldn't avoid giving it a slap. After settling Big Head, the family of three faced the late spring sun and leisurely walked out of the tea house. After not coming back for 2 months, a light layer of dust had already accumulated in the tea house. The couple rolled up their sleeves and began to clean. As for the little girl, she slipped into her own children's playground and happily played with building blocks by herself. However, she didn't play for long before there was a sudden burst of shouting outside the tea house. Nyen nyen. Nyen nyen. We're here. After not seeing each other for a long time, the two brothers were not polite at all. After each of them pushed open a glass door, the two brothers jumped into the tea house side by side. Gu Lao thought that the two brothers would wait for the old man to enter before letting go. He didn't expect that just as he walked to the door, the glass door had already bounced back and almost hit him in the face. This troublesome child, seeing this, Gu Lao helplessly shook his head, then opened the door and greeted Chen Shi and his wife. As usual, after making a pot of tea, Chen Shi played go with the old man. The three little things were making a ruckus in the children's playground. Qin Ruoying turned on the stereo and played some soothing light music. Then, she picked up a book called Collection of Flowers and sat in the booth next to the children's playground. In this warm spring season, this small tea house hidden in the corner of Hohai had a kind of leisurely and carefree atmosphere. At the same time, it was relaxed and lively. Unfortunately, although the tea house was good, it rarely had customers. Today was not the weekend, so it was not until Gu Lao brought the two brothers home for lunch that the door of the tea house was finally pushed open. He was still not a guest. The little fellow looked up. Wasn't this person Xiao Yuan, whom he hadn't seen for a long time? She didn't contact Chen Shi in advance, but she didn't expect that she would coincidentally rush over on the first day of the tea house's opening. If I remember correctly, Beijing Normal University is not that close to Hohai, right? Why did she just happen to wander over? Boss. Xiao Yuan had just walked into the tea house when she looked up and saw Chen Shi and his family sitting around a tea table preparing to eat. Therefore, she immediately lowered her head in embarrassment. She felt like she was here to freeload. Sister, you're here? Let's eat. Come. The little fellow waved the chopsticks in his hand and shouted excitedly. In fact, since the end of the winter vacation, Xiao Yuan would visit Hohai every day. She wanted to come over and help when the tea house opened. She didn't know why she liked to come here. Repaying kindness was only one reason. On the other hand, it was probably because of the boss family of three. Although the boss didn't look much older than her, he always gave people the feeling that he had seen the world. Coupled with the knowledgeable and virtuous lady boss, as well as the lively and cute little guy, Xiao Yuan always wanted to follow them around and learn from them in detail. This was not homework, nor was it work. It was an attitude towards life. As the saying goes, one is marked by the company one keeps. Birds of a feather flock together. Xiao Yuan felt that she might have met the light in her life. Unknowingly, she was influenced by the husband and wife, which caused her to have a change from the inside out. This change wasn't obvious, but hidden. Perhaps it would be many years later that she would truly realize what she had learned as a waitress here. Although the tea house didn't need to hire waiters, Qinshi obviously couldn't just chase them away. Therefore, after Qiao Yuan repeatedly promised that she wouldn't fall behind in her homework, Qinshi finally gave her the keys to the tea house. From now on, she would be the shopkeeper here. An ordinary and leisurely day passed just like that. Qiao Yuan took some time to go to school to get her suitcase. Then, she once again moved into the courtyard. As soon as she stepped through the drooping flower gate, she saw the huge fish tank and the big cat that was lying on top of the fish tank and kept meowing into the tank. Every time the big cat meowed, Big Head would immediately spit out a series of bubbles as if it was responding to it. The fish and the cat were communicating in a way that was completely incomprehensible to humans. Is this a anglerfish? The moment she saw the fish, such a question appeared in Xiao Yuan's mind. If she remembered correctly, the anglerfish should not have scales, right? This fish, what kind of fish was it? Why did it feel a little strange? Although Xiao Yuan felt that it was a little strange, she didn't ask much. She had already made up her mind to follow the boss in the future. She would see more, learn more, and do more. Although she was only a waitress in the tea house, when she held the keys to the tea house, a fighting spirit ignited in her heart for no reason. The peaceful and indifferent life kept repeating itself. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, it was summer. This morning, while the little girl was feeding the fish, Qinshi quietly came to her side, and then asked mysteriously, "Nian Nian, come, Daddy wants to ask you a question. Do you know what day it is tomorrow?" Hearing this, the little girl tilted her head and thought for a while. But after thinking for a long time, she still couldn't think of a reason. So she shook her head blankly. Think again? Qinshi asked again. But the little girl shook her head again. Qinshi had no choice but to cough lightly and remind her, today is May 5th. Hearing this, the little girl still didn't seem to react, and the expression on her face looked very cute. Qinshi was silent. Then, he suddenly raised both hands, like a child, and shouted very exaggeratedly, "Today is your birthday. Are you happy? Birthday?" The little girl was obviously stunned, but then, as if nothing had happened, she turned around and continued to throw minced meat into the fish tank. Big Head opened its bloody mouth. Every time it swallowed a piece of minced meat, it happily turned around in the water. And the big cat was lying on the side, and from time to time, it would poke its head out to snatch a piece of meat to eat. This behavior made Big Head so angry that it kept bubbling in its mouth. This scene made Qinshi stunned. Strange. Nian Nian's reaction was not right, but after thinking about it, Qinshi understood what was going on with the little girl. Chapter 325. Qinshi had discussed with Qin Ruoying for a long time about how to arrange Nian Nian's birthday. On her birthday, he would take her to fly in the sky, travel the 4 seas, look at the land of the divine land, and see all the beautiful scenery. Although the idea was quite tempting, after some consideration, Qinshi finally decided to let Nian Nian live a normal childhood. After all, this was not the Tianyuan world, and Nian Nian would have to go to school in the future. If he really let her come into contact with the world of immortal cultivators in advance, then when other children were talking about toys and cartoons, wouldn't Nian Nian be talking about how high and how deep the sea was? Let me tell you a secret, actually, my papa is Superman. He is invulnerable, and can fly. When he thought that Nian Nian might use such a proud tone to show off to her classmates in the future, Qinshi couldn't help but imagine their reactions. Ridicule was inevitable. Children nowadays were very precocious, and they already knew a lot of things when they were just a few years old. Many children thought that their father was Superman, but reality would always teach them a lesson. How could there be Superman in this world? So they would turn to ridicule those children who always thought that their father was Superman. If your father is so powerful, why don't you save the world? But the more they ridiculed her, the angrier Nian Nian would be, and then she would want to prove that she wasn't lying. After all, she knew that her father could really fly. Nian Nian wasn't lying, but who would believe such a thing that sounded like a fantasy story? Other people's fathers couldn't fly, why could your father fly? From the moment she said that her father was Superman, Nian Nian was no longer sociable, so everyone only ridiculed her even more. She said that her father is Superman. Do you believe it? I don't believe it. She must be bragging. Mom said not to play with bragging children. We have to stay away from her. Bragging king, bah. Of course, she didn't want to see such a thing happen, so after much consideration, he decided to arrange an ordinary and happy birthday for Nyan. Even if he didn't take her to fly, she believed, this day would be the best memory of Nyan's life. Therefore, after she comforted Nyan's inexplicable emotions, the family of 3 set off directly. They didn't bring the big cat, nor did they call the twins. Because all the activities today only him and Ying were needed. After she got into the taxi with Nyan in her arms, the little guy's mood was obviously relieved, so she nestled in his arms and asked softly, Papa, where are we going? As she spoke, she looked at Shi with her big, cute eyes. Needless to say, her small eyes were naturally filled with anticipation and desire. Papa and Mama were going to celebrate her birthday with her today. Since she wanted to give Nyan a birthday that a normal child should have, naturally, he had to plan carefully. After all, he wasn't the kind of parent who worked overtime all day and couldn't even spare time to celebrate a child's birthday. I'll take you to a fun place. Papa promises that you'll have a good time today. Really? Where is it? Hearing this, she immediately smiled, and then said mysteriously, it's a secret for now. He wanted to keep it a secret, but this little girl was impatient, so she kept shaking his arm and said coquettishly, Papa, tell me. Tell me. Okay, I'll tell you. She couldn't persuade this little girl, so after gently pinching her little face, he explained with a smile, today, I'll take you to the big world to play. The big world? The little guy pouted his little mouth and muttered this noun, but a blank expression appeared on his face. Because in her little brain, there was no place called the big world. Of course, the big world that she was talking about was not the big world hidden behind the divine gate, but the children's paradise world. This was a large outdoor expansion park that covered an area of 150 acres in the western suburbs of Shangjing. Although it was not as big as Disneyland in Zhonghai, it had its own characteristics and could be regarded as a holy place in the minds of children. The theme of the park was forest. So as soon as the little girl came to the gate of the park, she cried out, Papa, there are so many trees here. It was the end of spring and the summer solstice. The park was full of towering trees with luxuriant foliage, and the lush leaves were natural umbrellas. Walking on the stone path under the shade of the trees and looking at the green grass under the feet would inadvertently give people a very comfortable feeling. The slogan of the park was, Let children return to the forest and experience the best natural scenery. Since it was a children's paradise, naturally, a series of outdoor entertainment facilities were the most popular among children. But unlike other children's paradises, most of the children's facilities here were closely integrated with the forest. For example, the climbing net that was commonly seen in children's paradises was attached to several towering trees. From time to time, the children would climb from one tree to another, looking like lively and cute little monkeys. There was no ceiling or classroom here, and the whole forest was a children's activity area. Running freely in the open-air forest, listening to the sweet sounds of birds and insects. Although it was not as exquisite and beautiful as an indoor amusement park, it had a unique natural charm. The park was very large, and the activity area was naturally large. So after the little girl climbed in the jungle expansion area for a while, she was tired and out of breath. Thus, she was like a spider demon that had just eaten her fill. She sprawled out on the climbing net like that. Seeing this, the couple sat on the grass under the shade of the trees and kept cheering for her. The little fellow rested for a while, and then crawled up, huffing and puffing. When she finally climbed to another big tree and slid down the tree's slide, she waved her small hands and threw herself into Qin Ruoying's arms. Mama. Good, fun, I want to play. Qin Ruoying saw her panting and was ready to pull her to sit next to her. But she didn't expect, after the little guy finished drinking the water, he suddenly broke free from her arms and ran back to the starting point, ready to play again. This child, seeing this, Qin Ruoying could only shake her head slightly. Since it was a children's paradise, the child's safety was obviously fully guaranteed, so the couple sat aside and cheered the little girl up from time to time, so that she could play more happily. It wasn't that Nian Nian hadn't used these facilities before, but she still had a lot of fun today. Therefore, when Qin asked her if she had a good time today, the little girl suddenly nodded her head like a chicken pecking at rice. It was good that she was happy. Only when she was happy, it was considered a birthday. Since it was a birthday, naturally, there was a birthday cake. So, after the little girl had played to her heart's content, Qin took her to the park's self-service barbecue area. After making a sumptuous barbecue meal for her, Qin clapped his hands and signaled the staff next to him to push the cake up. As the cake entered, the band that Qin had arranged in advance immediately came to the little girl's side and played a birthday song for her. It wasn't that the park had never held a birthday party before, but it was really the first time that a birthday party was more grand than a marriage proposal for a child's birthday. Therefore, the area where Qin's family was immediately surrounded by tourists who were watching the fun. Accompanied by the band's performance, the onlookers, led by Qin and Qin Ruoying, sang the birthday song together loudly. Happy birthday to you, 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 healthy birthday to you, have a warm family, Nian Nian, happy birthday. When had the little girl ever seen such a scene? So, she was stunned on the spot. Until Qin pushed the cake in front of her, the little girl didn't seem to come back to her senses. Seeing this, Qin squatted beside her and said softly, Nian Nian, happy birthday. Come, blow out the candles, and you can make a wish, any wish is fine. Chapter 326. Birthday Wish? Looking at the crowd of onlookers, the little girl couldn't help but feel a little dazed, so she timidly grabbed Qin's arm. She looked like she had stage fright. In fact, Aunt Zhang had celebrated her birthday before, but she had never mentioned anything about birthday wishes. After all, she was old and naturally did not know much about foreign culture. In the past, her family was poor. A red egg and a bowl of longevity noodles were the best birthday gifts for children. As for birthday cakes, in Aunt Zhang's eyes, those were just snacks that children liked to eat. Since Nian Nian liked them, she would buy them for her. Therefore, Aunt Zhang did not have any concept of making a birthday wish on her birthday, so she had never arranged for it for her. Nian Nian, what birthday wish do you have? Today is your birthday, so you just have to make a wish now. After you blow out the candles, your wish will come true. Qin hugged the little girl and explained patiently in her ear. The little girl curled up in Qin's arms. After looking up at Qin, she pouted and shook her head, as if she could not think of anything she wanted. Seeing this, Qin tried to guide her. Nian Nian, you can only make a birthday wish once a year. Don't you have anything in particular that you want? For example, if you want to eat something, play something, or go somewhere, you can tell me now. Daddy promises to satisfy you. Hearing this, the little girl seemed to finally understand the concept of a birthday wish. Therefore, she pouted and asked hesitantly, can I really make anything come true? Ahem, this question made Qin pause for a moment. At this point, if the little girl made a wish but could not make it come true, wouldn't she be very disappointed? After all, this was the first time she made a birthday wish. Qin was a little hesitant about whether to make a promise. However, on second thought, she was just a 5-year-old child. Could she make a wish that was so difficult to make? Therefore, he answered with certainty, yes, Father can promise you that no matter what you wish for, it will come true. When he said this, Qin's tone was particularly solemn, which made Qin Ruoying, who was beside him, couldn't help but glance at him. This sentence was, what about the father's promise to his daughter? The little fellow didn't feel anything special, so when she heard Qin's reply, she smiled happily and said, okay. Then I have a wish. With that said, under the guidance of Qin, she stood on the bench facing the cake. Then, she put her hands together, closed her eyes, and prepared to make a wish. Looking at her serious face, the crowd immediately quieted down, afraid to disturb this cute little girl. She didn't think for long before she suddenly opened her eyes and said excitedly, my wish is, Papa and Mama have to stay by my side forever. After that, the little thing puffed up its little mouth and tried its best to blow out all 5 candles on the cake. A child's mind was not so complicated. She said what she thought. However, it was such a simple and somewhat unrealistic wish that directly displayed the thoughts in the depths of her heart. She held the little fellow in his arms and didn't speak immediately, but the crowd around them burst into laughter. After hearing the little fellow's wish, a middle-aged man with a child immediately said with a smile, "Silly girl, when you get married, how can your parents stay by your side? At that time, you'll want to drive them away." "That's right. A married daughter is like spilled water. My child won't come back to accompany us a few times a year unless she is wronged at home. If she doesn't come to accompany you, you can go to her. Do you think she dares to drive you out of the house? Hey, they are busy making grandchildren. How can I disturb them?" This conversation also amused the onlookers and made them laugh one after another. However, the little fellow was not happy. She immediately pouted and shouted unhappily, "No. I don't want to get married. I want to be with Papa and Mama. Forever and ever." After saying that, she even made a face with an unconvinced expression, which immediately made everyone laugh out loud. "Oh, your child is so cute. If my child is so cute, I will consider not letting her marry in the future." "Don't, you have to ask the child if she is willing to do this first. Otherwise, it will be too late for you to regret it if they elope." "Don't jinx it." The crowd of onlookers kept talking, and the atmosphere was very lively. Seeing this, the little fellow pulled Chin Ruoying's hand, pointed to the cake on the table and shouted, "Mama, I want to eat cake." "Silly child." Hearing this, Chin Ruoying rubbed her head with a smile. "You are a child, but you don't know that your parents have already taken it seriously." The couple looked at each other silently. After that, Shi gently pecked the little fellow's face, then stood up and asked the crowd to eat the cake with Chin Ruoying. Good things naturally had to be shared. There were a lot of people, so the birthday girl was only given a small piece of such a big cake. Although there wasn't much cake, when she saw that everyone was holding her birthday cake, her little face bloomed with joy. So many people were celebrating her birthday with her. She was so happy. After eating the cake, the crowd of onlookers left their blessings and dispersed. The reason why the couple chose to bring the little fellow here for her birthday today was mainly because there was a parent-child camping area in the park. Therefore, when Shi opened the rented tent by the lake, the little fellow immediately got in excitedly, and then excitedly turned over and over on the mat. "Papa! Come in! Mama! Come in, come in!" At this moment, it was already evening, and the sky was red. The family of 3 lay in the tent, quietly looking up at the sunset. The green grass, the clear lake, the towering trees, and the sound of insects and birds from time to time. At this moment, the family of 3 was particularly peaceful. The little fellow put her head on Shi's chest, quietly watching the sunset dye the sky and the water red. Perhaps she also realized that the wish she had just made was not reliable, so she could not help muttering, "Papa, Mama, What's wrong? Don't leave me again, okay? I don't want to be a wild child." Hearing this, Shi suddenly felt a surge of warmth in his heart. Even with his age and experience, he could not control the sudden burst of emotion for a while. Therefore, Shi immediately hugged the little fellow with one hand and Chin Ruoying with the other, and replied very solemnly, "Okay." This warm atmosphere seemed to have infected Chin Ruoying, so she followed the little fellow and leaned her head on Shi's chest. Then, the mother and daughter leaned on Shi's chest like this, blinking their eyes and looking at each other. "Nyan, come on, Dad will teach you a song." "Is it Little Star?" No, I'll teach you a new song today, okay? Then listen carefully, I'll sing it once first." After that, Shi began to hum softly. This song was very simple, and the melody was not very complicated, so after listening to it twice, the little fellow could hum along with Shi's low voice, coupled with Chin Ruoying's quiet and gentle voice, plus the little fellow's clear and melodious childish voice. This song, "Insects Fly," which always gave people a feeling of sadness, was unexpectedly sung by this family of 3 with a happy and cheerful taste, the dark sky hung low, followed by the bright stars. Insects fly, who are you thinking of? The stars in the sky shed tears, the roses on the ground withered. The cold wind blows, as long as you're with me. Insects fly, flowers sleep, pairs after pairs are beautiful. I'm not afraid of darkness, I'm only afraid of heartbreak. Chapter 327. It was a very ordinary birthday, but it was destined to be the most precious memory in the little girl's life. There was a gentle breeze by the lakeside, a lush green meadow, and a lush forest. The family of 3 lay lazily in the tent and fell asleep under the accompaniment of the starlight. It wasn't until the sun rose again that the little girl opened her eyes in a daze under the sunlight. The important birthday passed just like that, but her interest didn't seem to have waned at all. So, as soon as she got up, the little girl squatted by the lake and happily played with the lake water. Seeing this, she took her to breathe the first breath of fresh morning air while doing exercises by the lake. Nyan, Daddy will teach you how to do morning exercises, right? Okay. Good girl, then come over and stand behind me. I'll do one, you do another. 1 2 3 4, 2 2 3 4, very good. Next is body rotation exercise, walk. She acted as a physical education teacher, standing by the lake and shouting slogans while doing standard movements. The little girl followed behind she's butt, doing her best to twist her butt and shake her hands. That silly look looked very cute. As she's magical slogan continued to ring out, many parents seemed to be infected by him. So, they brought their children behind them and started to do the radio calisthenics with the father and daughter pair. After finishing their morning exercises and eating breakfast, the family of 3 finally got on the car to return home. On the way back, she played the role of a language teacher and gave the little girl an essay question. The question was, the most unforgettable day. The little girl was very interested in this question that was obviously out of the syllabus. So, she told the little guy about the 6 essentials of writing, and under his patient guidance, the little guy was able to draw inferences about other things from one example, and successfully wrote the first essay of his life. The only regret was, Nyan still didn't know how to write, so there was no way to write this essay on paper. However, she believed that when Nyan attended language classes in the future, this piece of, the most unforgettable day, would definitely become a model for her teacher's lectures. Under their tutelage, Nyan would definitely become an excellent Chinese class representative in the future. In this regard, she was full of confidence. It was a sunny afternoon in Hohai, a quiet and cozy little tea house. The leisurely days passed by slowly. Until this day, May 20th. Only half a month had passed since Nyan's birthday. Logically speaking, with the dry summer weather, there should be very little fog in the morning. But today, he didn't know why. In the morning, as soon as the little girl opened the door, she saw a foggy scene, as if winter was coming. The thick fog obscured their vision. The little fellow stood outside the door of the west wing. When she raised her head, she couldn't even see the door of the east wing clearly. The visibility was at most 5 meters. Standing in the courtyard and looking at the sky, the thick fog even covered the brilliant morning sun. The fog cast a mysterious veil over the familiar things around him. Standing in the courtyard and looking at the sky, the thick fog even covered the brilliant morning sun. The whole sky was gloomy. In this regard, the little fellow was particularly excited. She actually played hide and seek with the big cat in the fog. The big cat circled around the courtyard, and the little fellow chased after it. Because she ran too fast, when she realized that there was someone in front of her, it was too late to stop. Thus, the little fellow fell into the arms of that person. Nyan, run slower. Be careful not to fall. The little fellow looked up and found that she had fallen into Qin Yongyan's arms. She immediately opened her mouth and sweetly called, "Grandpa, good girl, go play." Qin Yongyan touched the little fellow's head, and then gently let go of her. After this period of cultivation, Qin Yongyan's cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. He was originally a master of gang strength, so when he refined all the genuine qi in his body into genuine essence, his cultivation smoothly reached the late stage of foundation establishment. He was only one step away from becoming a legendary celestial being. Qin Yongyan stood on the stairs outside the main hall and looked at the sky thoughtfully. Only then did he turn his head to look at the west wing. Then, he suddenly nodded in that direction, as if he was greeting someone. The little fellow continued to chase the big cat in the courtyard. Suddenly, a pair of big hands stretched out from the fog and directly picked up the naughty little fellow from the ground. Nian, stop playing. It's time for breakfast. Chen Shi's gentle voice rang in the little fellow's ears. So, the little fellow immediately put her arms around Chen Shi's neck and said coquettishly, "Papa, I want to eat crystal shrimp dumplings." Didn't you say you wanted to eat soup dumplings today? No soup dumplings. I want crystal shrimp dumplings. Chen Shi was obviously prepared for this little fellow who often changed her mind, so he pinched her nose and said with a smile, "I knew you would do this. Let's go. We have both. You can eat whichever you like, Papa is so nice." It was obvious that this sudden fog was a sign of the arrival of the heavenly anomaly. Just as Bai Hong had said, the gate of heaven would open again very soon. Chen Shi didn't think too much about this. The gate of heaven opened for a limited time each time. Even if the people of Heaven Capital were determined to investigate, what could they find in such a short time? The village had been destroyed, and Bai Hong and her people were either dead or injured. They were still locked in the cave at the bottom of the sea. Everything that needed to be dealt with had already been arranged properly. Who would know that he was the one who did all this? What's more, even if they knew, what could they do? If a cultivator at the soul formation stage was determined to hide, it was definitely not so easy to find. Right now, Chen Shi only wanted to live a low-key life, so when this fog appeared, he acted like he did a few days ago. He ate, slept, and acted as if everything had nothing to do with him. Therefore, after the family of three had breakfast, they prepared to open the tea house as usual. But just as they were about to walk out of the courtyard, Qin Ruoying suddenly stopped. She frowned and looked a little uncomfortable. "Ying? What's wrong?" Chen Shi immediately noticed Qin Ruoying's strangeness, so he hurried to her side and held her hand very nervously. "Nothing. I just felt a little dizzy just now. I'm fine now." Hearing this, Chen Shi couldn't help but look at Qin Ruoying with slight surprise. Dizzy? What a joke. What's Ying's cultivation level? How could she feel dizzy? At the thought of this, Chen Shi immediately released a trace of true essence, and then carefully sorted out Qin Ruoying's physical condition. He didn't find any problems. But the more it was like this, the more worried Chen Shi was. Ying could get sick. Chen Shi's expression was a little uncertain. In order not to worry him, Qin Ruoying seriously felt her own situation, and then said with a smile, "It's really nothing. Maybe it's because I was a little absent-minded just now, so I felt like this. Now I'm fine." Qin Ruoying signaled Chen Shi not to worry. At this time, the little fellow, who had already run out of the door with Xiao Yuan, turned her head and found that her parents didn't follow, so she quickly ran back. "Papa? What's wrong?" The little fellow looked at Chen Shi in confusion. Seeing his dignified look, she carefully stretched out her small hand and pulled the corner of Chen Shi's clothes. Chen Shi was silent for a while, and then suddenly said to Xiao Yuan, Xiao, you go and open the door first. Ying is a little uncomfortable today. I'll take her to the hospital." "Okay, boss, I'll go and open the door first." After Xiao Yuan left, Chen Shi ignored Qin Ruoying's objection and took her directly back to the room. "Nian, Papa is going to check Mama's body. You watch cartoons by yourself first. When Papa is sure that Mama is fine, I'll take you to the tea house, okay?" "Okay." The little fellow nodded very sensibly, and then sat on the bed obediently. Seeing Chen Shi's dignified look, Qin Ruoying gently squeezed his hand and said with a smile, "I'm really fine." Hearing this, Chen Shi directly interrupted her, and then said with a serious face, "Good girl, I'll check whether you're fine or not." Chapter 328. Some people could become a world-class superstar by playing football, while others could become an Olympic champion by diving. But if one wanted to reach the top of the world in something, it was definitely not something that could be achieved by hard work alone. Everything had to be about talent. Even when playing games, some people could reach the diamond rank after playing for 3 months, while others were still struggling in the silver rank after playing for 3 years. There were geniuses in all walks of life, but in this world, most of them were ordinary people who could not even compare to others in playing games. Qin Ruoying was such an ordinary person. At least, in terms of cultivation, she really did not have any outstanding points. So even with Chen Shi, a soul formation expert, training with her all day long, Qin Ruoying's improvement was still so slow. With this kind of cultivation talent, if placed in the Sky Yen God sect, she might not even be as good as the most ordinary outer disciple, but there was no other way. Who asked her to have a strong background? Of course, poor aptitude was one thing, but no matter how bad Qin Ruoying was, she was still a cultivator who had stepped into the foundation establishment stage. Even martial artists could be immune to all kinds of diseases, let alone cultivators. Therefore, when Qin Ruoying said that she was a little dizzy, Chen Shi's reaction was obviously a little overboard. As the saying goes, once bitten, twice shy. Perhaps it was because Qin Ruoying had lost her Yin spirit previously, Chen Shi now paid extra attention to any abnormal situation. For the sake of caution, Chen Shi even used the amplification effect of the soul crystal, and carefully checked the situation of Qin Ruoying's soul. Qin Ruoying's Yin spirit had already returned, so no matter how Chen Shi looked, he did not find any problems. Could it be, was it really like what Ying said, because she was a little absent-minded just now, so she suddenly felt a little dizzy? Psychological effect? While Chen Shi was depressed, the little fellow was secretly paying attention to his expression. As soon as she saw the expression on Chen Shi's face slightly relax, this clever little thing eagerly came to his side, then hugged his arm and acted like a spoiled child. "Papa, what's wrong with Mama?" This silly child has learned how to read people's expressions. Seeing this, Chen Shi pinched her little face and said with a smile, "Mommy is fine. Let's go. I'll take you to the tea house to play with your brothers." "All right." Since Qin Ruoying was indeed fine, Chen Shi could naturally put down the big stone in his heart. When the family of 3 walked out of the west wing again, the thick fog in front of them still hadn't disappeared. The heavenly anomaly this time, could it have happened in Shangjing? Chen Shi looked up at the sky and observed for a while. In the end, he did not want to go and investigate. Instead, he carried the little fellow and walked straight into the tea house. Whether it was the recovery of spirit energy or the opening of the heavenly gates, none of this had anything to do with Chen Shi. Whether it was in the past or in the present, his ambition had never changed, and that was 30 mu of land, a cow, and a warm bed for his wife and children. Just a few simple sayings, but they were enough to describe the ideal life in his heart. While Chen Shi was busy accompanying his wife and children, Siachen Glacier, Beiyao Temple. Chen Shi had long guessed that someone might come to the Beiyao Temple to check the situation, so he removed the restrictions outside the temple long ago. At the top of the snowy mountain, the wind and snow seemed to never calm down for a moment. The mountain wind whistled past, mixed with bursts of snowflakes fluttering in the air. It was obviously a beautiful dynamic picture, but it gave people a sense of peace and tranquility. At this moment, it seemed that even time had stopped. In the wind and snow, 2 figures were particularly conspicuous, like 2 drops of ink on a piece of rice paper. One of them was relatively young, about 30 years old. The other person's hair and beard were all white, and he wore a green robe. He seemed to have a kind of sage-like charm. The young man was holding a bronze mirror in his hand, but the surface of this bronze mirror was dark. But there was something strange about it. There was a metallic luster flowing on the surface of the black mirror. From afar, this bronze mirror looked like a black hole, with a mysterious and wonderful beauty. "Master, if the records of the divination pavilion are not wrong, the Beiyao Temple should be here." The young man looked around, but under the wind and snow, what could he see except for the white snow? The snow had already drowned everything. The old man frowned and cast his gaze on a snowy area. Immediately after, he gently waved his sleeve, and an invisible force suddenly burst out. Like a stone smashing into water, the accumulated snow on the snowy ground immediately exploded and scattered in all directions, turning into snowflakes that fluttered in the air. Then, the old man waved his sleeve again, and a gust of wind suddenly blew in the air. In an instant, the snow that covered the sky and the sun was all blown to another mountain top. The wind and snow suddenly stopped. A black building suddenly appeared in the old man's line of sight. This unopened sacred hall was like a flower bud waiting to bloom, standing alone on the mountain peak. Seeing this, the young man immediately soared into the air and flew above the hall in the blink of an eye. He held the mirror and looked at the hall. Immediately, as if some mechanism had been activated, a series of ka-ka rotating sounds could be heard in the hall. Then, this black hall slowly bloomed under the young man's slightly bewildered eyes. This is the Baiyao Temple? The young man landed in the center of the hall and carefully looked at the strange patterns on the floor. But just as he was curious about the things around him, the old man suddenly called out to him. "Wushu, there's no need to look. Let's go." Hearing this, the young man called Wushu immediately flew back to the old man's side, and then asked with a puzzled expression, "Master, what happened to this temple? The evil spirit has been destroyed, and the soul crystal has been lost. Without these two cores, the Baiyao Temple can be considered to be completely destroyed. Is there no way to repair it?" "There's no way." The old man shook his head, then suddenly asked, "Wushu, carefully feel the aura here and see if you can sense anything." "Okay." After hearing the old man's words, the young man sat cross-legged in the air, held his breath, and carefully felt the surrounding spirit of heaven and earth. "Master, this place seems to have the aura of senior brother Baihong. He should have been here before, is that so?" After the old man glanced at the black lotus below, he waved his sleeve again. The wind and snow all over the sky suddenly surged. The old man did not use true essence to protect his body. Instead, he allowed the goose feather-like snow to continuously fall on his body. Therefore, in a short while, the old man's body was covered with a shallow layer of white snow. "They came in a hurry, and they left in a hurry. If I'm not wrong, they're probably dead by now, what?" Hearing this, the young man's face couldn't help but change drastically. He looked quite excited and asked, "There is still someone in the lower realm who can hurt senior brother?" "Why not? Moreover, are you so sure that the person who hurt them must be from the lower realm?" "Master, I don't understand what you mean. If you don't understand, think more." Seeing the old man's serious expression, the young man wisely shut his mouth. Then, the old man thoughtfully looked at the bronze mirror in the young man's hand. "Let's talk about this later. The most important thing now is how to deal with the prophecy left by the divine ancestor. The Baiyao Temple is destroyed, and one of the 5 is missing. Perhaps the divine ancestor expected this to happen back then, so he left this soul mirror behind. Let's go to the All Saints Valley first. I hope nothing happened to the inheritance of Si Ming Xian Nu." Chapter 329. The heavy fog lasted for about 2 hours. Because such a heavy fog was so rare, CCTV even made a special report to analyze the reasons for the heavy fog in summer from all aspects. Chen Shi and Gu Lao were drinking tea while listening to the experts on TV blabber on and on. Experts analyzed many possibilities, but the final conclusion was still related to global warming, the greenhouse effect, and such terms that people were already familiar with. No matter what the situation was, as long as there was an abnormal climate, it was definitely due to environmental degradation. Therefore, the experts only repeatedly appealed on TV, hoping that people would spontaneously protect the environment and protect the common home of all mankind. Only a very small number of people knew, what did the appearance of the heaven and earth phenomenon mean? Although Chen Shi was in the tea house, his mind was always outside the house. When the heavy fog dissipated, the hot summer sun once again shone on Ho Hai Old Street. Chen Shi smiled and retracted his divine sense. The heavy fog dissipated, which meant that the gate of heaven was closed, and those people should naturally go back. This was undoubtedly good news for Chen Shi. He was not afraid of them, he just didn't want to trouble them. After all, Chen Shi had long passed the age of yelling and killing. Being able to quietly drink tea for a while was more appropriate for an old man like him. Chen Shi and Gu Lao chatted about the recent abnormal weather. While they were chatting, Gu Lao seemed to be touched by something. After a moment of silence, he couldn't help but sigh softly. The ancients said that whenever there is a heaven and earth phenomenon, something big must happen. Chen Shi thought he was referring to the recent weather, so he smiled and didn't say anything. Gu Lao's mind drifted further and further. Before Chen Shi could speak, he continued, I didn't see anything big, but recently, strange things have been happening one after another. Oh? Hearing this, Chen Shi finally seemed to be interested, so he smiled and asked, what strange things have you encountered recently? Sigh, maybe it's because I'm old, so this old man is becoming more and more superstitious. Gu Lao smiled and shook his head. After looking at Chen Shi thoughtfully, he sighed softly, there are some things that I've been keeping in my heart for a long time. Little Chen, I can see that you're not an ordinary person. If you're willing to listen, I can tell you about it. Just treat it as listening to an old man complain. Chen Shi had known Gu Lao for some time, but he had never seen him show such an expression, so he immediately smiled and said, interesting, why don't you tell me about it first? Let me make this clear first. You youngsters should just treat this as a joke. Don't take it to heart, it's nothing, we're just chatting. Don't worry, I'm not a blabbermouth, alright, it's actually like this. Then, Gu Lao spoke of the things that had been buried in his heart all this time. The old man had never mentioned his family matters to Chen Shi before, but he didn't expect to spill it all out this time. Gu Lao had a daughter, the mother of the two brothers, named Gu Yao. But what was regrettable was that, just when Chen Shi moved from Zhonghai to Beijing with Nian, Gu Yao died in a car accident. Gu Lao used to live in his hometown in Jizhou. Because of Gu Yao's death, he returned to Hohai to take care of the two children for his daughter. In fact, Chen Shi had already guessed that there might be something going on in Gu Lao's family. After all, if it was a normal family, how could an old man like Gu Lao take care of the children 365 days a year? And there were two of them at once, not to mention whether he had the energy or not. Didn't the children miss their parents at all? What about their parents? No matter how busy they were, there had to be a limit, right? The two brothers rarely mentioned their father, which meant that they didn't like their father. The children were still young, so Gu Lao could only lie to the two children that their mother had something to do abroad and would only come back once in a while. This excuse was just like how Auntie Zhang used to lie to Nian. But here was the strange thing. The reason why these two silly children didn't clamor for their mother was that Gu Yao often came back to see them. Moreover, the frequency of her coming back was obviously much higher than before. I buried Yao Yao with my own hands, in the back of the mountain in my hometown. One day after dinner, I was watching TV in the room, and the two of them suddenly ran to me and told me that their mother was back. You don't know, when I heard this sentence, my first reaction was that all the hair on my body stood up. Yao Yao is my daughter and their mother, so I believe that even if she became a ghost, she would never hurt me and the children. But you also know, there is a difference between humans and ghosts. How can humans stay with ghosts? So, since that happened, I took the children out every day until it was dark, because I was afraid that if they stayed with Yao Yao for too long, they would be infected with Yin energy. After hearing Gu Lao's strange words, Chen Shi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the end, she couldn't help but interrupt him and ask, are you so sure that the child's mother has become a ghost? How can there be ghosts in this world? Have you seen one? Although I can't see it, the two of them can. Speaking of this, Gu Lao turned to the direction of the children's park and asked loudly, when was the last time your mother came back? The older brother was busy playing marbles with the little guy, so the one who answered was the younger brother. Yesterday. Mom just came back yesterday. After that, the younger brother immediately lay back on the cushion, because it was his turn to play. The three children played happily in the children's park, but Gu Lao could only shake his head and sigh. In this regard, Chen Shi didn't know what to say. Ghosts. It's just a lingering spirit after death. From the perspective of immortal cultivators, the spirit was just a kind of pure and weak energy body. It couldn't even be called a life. Everything has a spirit. Not only human beings will leave behind a spirit after death. If it's a spirit left behind by a living creature, it will retain some memories of its life. but it won't be more than 7 days. It's also because the spirit is pure enough that it's easier for the spirit to come into contact with the origin of all things, heaven and earth spiritual chi. Take a human as an example. If soon after a person's death, the spirit happens to float to a place with rich heaven and earth spiritual chi, then it's very likely that it will merge with the heaven and earth spiritual chi and exist in the world as a more powerful energy body. The spirit isn't scary, because they were just weak mortals, animals, or even plants when they were alive. A little bit of heaven and earth spiritual chi only provided them with a chance to continue to exist in the world. When the heaven and earth spiritual chi is exhausted, it's the time when they really disappear. This is the fundamental reason why there are so many ghost legends. But now the strange thing is, Guyao has been dead for more than half a year, but her spirit hasn't disappeared, and this. Chapter 330. Things like ghosts, in fact, they weren't as mysterious as the legend said. They were just a kind of energy body, so ordinary people couldn't see them at all. But if the ghost suddenly condensed too much energy for some unknown reason, it would cause the ghost's soul body to materialize. It was precisely because of this that ordinary people could see ghosts. Of course, this situation was extremely rare. In addition to this situation, there were a very small number of people who could directly see ghosts with their naked eyes. These kinds of people often appeared in folklore, yin-yang eyes. However, the yin-yang eyes wasn't very accurate. Immortal cultivators knew more than ordinary people, so from the perspective of immortal cultivators, the so-called yin-yang eyes was actually far more sensitive than ordinary people, so they could keenly detect signs of spiritual energy or energy fluctuations. These people were obviously good seedlings suitable for cultivation. Although Qinshi didn't specifically test the brothers' cultivation aptitude, the fact that they could see Gu Yao's ghost meant that the aptitude of these two brothers wouldn't be too bad. Although the seedlings were good, they weren't enough to arouse Qinshi's interest. What he was more concerned about was, it had been more than half a year, why hadn't Gu Yao's ghost dissipated? One had to know that the ghost of an ordinary person could only last for 7 days at most. Without the nourishment of the physical body, the soul was quite fragile. Even if the cultivation reached the golden core stage, as long as the yuanying hadn't been condensed, it was impossible to exist in the form of a soul for a long time. Qinshi was thinking about the reason why Gu Yao hadn't dissipated. Seeing that he had been silent, Gu Lao thought that Qinshi thought he was crazy, so he immediately shook his head and smiled. Forget it, just treat these things as gossip. Children's words carry no harm. Maybe it's because they miss their mother too much that they have such hallucinations, night talk in the city, ghosts, and monsters. These things had always been circulating in folklore, and Gu Lao didn't want this matter to make Qinshi feel uncomfortable. After all, even if Gu Yao became a ghost, she was still Gu Lao's biological daughter, so Gu Lao believed that Gu Yao wouldn't hurt him. Qinshi wasn't related to Gu Yao in any way. What if she was accidentally targeted by her? It was better for ordinary people to stay away from such strange things. What's more, Gu Yao had been appearing more and more frequently recently. Every time she appeared, although Gu Lao couldn't see it, he could clearly feel the change in the surrounding temperature. It was clearly a hot summer day, but the room seemed to be air-conditioned. Gu Lao was also worried about this matter, so he couldn't help but tell Qinshi about it. But as soon as he finished speaking, Gu Lao regretted it. It was best not to scare others when it came to their own matters. However, after listening to Gu Lao's words, Qinshi responded with a relaxed smile. Let's not talk about whether these things are superstitious or not, but I see that these two children are usually fine. There are no problems with their physical and mental health. Since it's been more than half a year, there shouldn't be any problems. You can think of it this way. Even if these things are just the children's illusions, at least these illusions can bring a certain degree of comfort to the two of them. Just treat it as a kind of spiritual sustenance. After all, the children are still young. They may not be able to accept the fact that their mother has passed away. When they grow up, you can tell them the truth. Maybe this way, it will be easier for them to accept it. Qinshi's words were very vague, but Gu Lao still understood the meaning of his words. Gu Yao had passed away for more than half a year. If she really wanted to hurt her children, something would have happened to these two children long ago. Now these two brothers were alive and kicking all day. It was probably because she loved her children that Gu Yao often returned to visit them. If he thought about it this way, it seemed to be acceptable. Thinking of this, Gu Lao couldn't help but look at Qin Shi with a little surprise and asked doubtfully, "Aren't you afraid?" Afraid of what? This kind of bad luck. If I go back to my hometown and tell them, the people in the village will probably drive us out on the spot. The three of us won't be allowed to go back in this life. If you believe it, then it's true. If you don't believe it, then it's not true. I'm a good person, but I don't believe in evil, so this kind of thing will absolutely not scare me. Hearing this, Gu Lao's mood suddenly became much better. After taking a sip of the tea cup, a smile finally appeared on his face and he said, "That's good. I was worried that I would scare you. I won't have such good tea to drink in the future. You can rest assured. I'm one of the 5 good young men of the new era. I have Mao Gai, Ma Zhe, and Deng Luan to protect me. I have a 5-star red flag floating above my head and a party emblem hanging on my chest. I guarantee that all evil will be repelled and nothing will be able to invade me." Okay, let's see what you can do." After hearing Qin Shi's words, Gu Lao couldn't help but laugh out loud, so he immediately changed the topic and asked with a smile, "Since you are so good, why don't you come to my place for a meal later?" In fact, Gu Lao didn't really want to invite Qin Shi home for a meal. He just wanted to use this opportunity to take down his prestige. After all, the two were considered friends despite the difference in age, so they often made some harmless jokes. But what Gu Lao didn't expect was, Qin Shi didn't seem to have used his brain to think. After hearing Gu Lao's words, he didn't back down. Instead, he immediately nodded and hurriedly responded, "Okay, I've always wanted to try your cooking. This time, I finally got the opportunity." Old Gu was stunned by Old Gu's eagerness. Gu Lao was stunned for a while, then he shook his head violently, and then said with a complicated expression, "Forget it, I'm just joking with you. In the future, there will be plenty of opportunities in the future. I'm not afraid. What are you afraid of? It's just a meal, it won't get in the way." No, I really can't, it's not safe." "What's not safe?" "It's broad daylight, you're still afraid of ghosts? How about this, I'll accompany you back to cook now. After it's done, I'll bring it here to eat. Is that okay?" "Hey, I say, what's wrong with you? Why don't you listen to my advice?" "Because I'm a party member." Hearing Qin Shi's answer, Gu Lao almost choked to death. The two of them struggled for a long time over the matter of freeloading. In the end, Gu Lao couldn't persuade Qin Shi, so he had to look at the time helplessly. It was now 3:30 in the afternoon. In fact, what Qin Shi said also made sense. There shouldn't be any problems in broad daylight, so after hesitating for a while, Gu Lao reluctantly agreed to Qin Shi's proposal. So, Qin Shi immediately said goodbye to Qin Ruoying, then pulled Gu Lao out. Gu Lao's home was also near Hohai. It was less than 500 meters away from the tea house, but it had to circle around Hohai. On the way back, Gu Lao was still struggling whether to take him home. Seeing this, Qin Shi immediately found a topic to divert Gu Lao's attention, so he pretended to be curious and asked, "Hey, by the way, where's the child's father? Why haven't I heard you mention it to the child?" As soon as these words came out, Gu Lao's face suddenly became a lot worse. Chapter 331. Heartless Man. After hearing this sentence, Qin Shi's curiosity was suddenly aroused. Could it be those vulgar scenes of abandoning one's wife and children? However, this was someone else's family affair after all, and it was a scandal, so Qin Shi couldn't ask further, so he wisely shut his mouth. This question obviously touched the old man's mind, so after Gu Lao was silent for a while, he sighed deeply and said, "At that time, not only was Yao Yao blind, but I was also blind." Then, Gu Lao frowned and talked about the past of Gu Yao and her husband. Gu Yao's husband was called Xia Kaiji, and the two were college classmates. Xia Kaiji's family condition wasn't very good, but he was ambitious. When others were playing basketball and playing games, he was immersed in studying all day. This kind of man was a typical phoenix man, commonly known as a golden phoenix that flew out of a chicken coop. Phoenix man was not a derogatory term, but because their shortcomings and strengths were equally conspicuous, they slowly left a bad impression in people's hearts. Hard work, diligence, self-discipline, these were all advantages. Because they suffered too much when they were young, most of them were far more mature than their peers, and they hoped to change everything through their own efforts. Just like what a female star said, "I'm from a rich family myself." The worse the family situation, the more eager they were to change through their own efforts. This also led to a very complicated mentality, inferiority, and conceit at the same time. Back then, Gu Yao had been captivated by Xia Kaiji's maturity, which far surpassed that of his peers. But this kind of confidence and maturity often turned into shrewdness. Gu Lao wasn't the kind of person who had secular prejudice, so naturally, he didn't mind Xia Kaiji's poor birth, so after seeing Xia Kaiji a few times, the old man agreed to the relationship between the two. Xia Kaiji was indeed very hardworking. A few years after the two graduated, he became a senior executive in a large company, but with the gradual success of his career, some long-hidden problems gradually exposed. For Xia Kaiji, his career was always above everything. But for Gu Yao, family was the center of life. For this reason, the husband and wife, who were originally intimate, also had a gap. And with the birth of the twins, this gap was gradually widened. Gu Yao quit her job and stayed at home to take care of the child, but Xia Kaiji was nowhere to be seen all day. Finally, one day, Gu Yao had enough of living like a widow. So, after a big fight with Xia Kaiji, Gu Yao took the child and moved back to the old residence in Hohai. Perhaps it was because Xia Kaiji's career had indeed reached a critical juncture during that time, so he hadn't come to find Gu Yao. It was precisely because of this that the two of them had completely lost the chance to reconcile. By the time Xia Kaiji saw Gu Yao again, she was already lying quietly in the hospital morgue. He didn't even have time to look at Gu Yao before he was chased out by the furious Gu Lao. At this point, this unfortunate marriage had completely come to an end. The reason why Gu Lao scolded Xia Kaiji was because Xia Kaiji didn't take good care of Gu Yao, and because of the two children. After Gu Yao's death, Gu Lao felt that the responsibility was all on Xia Kaiji, so he firmly refused to let him raise the two children and refused to let Xia Kaiji see the children. After Xia Kaiji communicated with Gu Lao a few times, he had to let the old man do what he wanted because he didn't want to go to court with his father-in-law because of this matter. So, except for the living expenses that were sent to Gu Lao's account every month, Xia Kaiji completely disappeared from Gu Lao's sight. But the more it was like this, the angrier Gu Lao was. The reason why he didn't let Xia Kaiji see the children was that he wanted to embarrass Xia Kaiji a little as a punishment. But Xia Kaiji didn't even have the least sincerity. After being scolded by him a few times, he actually didn't come anymore. Little son of a bitch. Gu Lao cursed for the first time, and then he continued to hatefully, "The two children are so cute. He doesn't want them as a father, but I, as a grandfather, want them. And he even wants to send living expenses every month, bah. Does he think I care about his stinky money?" A few days ago, the agent called me and asked if I was selling this old house in Hohai. He said this old house is worth a lot of money now. Tomorrow, I'll go to the police station and change the surname of the two children. In the future, they will follow my surname, Gu. The more Gu Lao spoke, the angrier he became. It made Chen Shi, who started this topic, a little embarrassed. He really touched the pot that didn't boil. As a bystander, of course it wasn't good to comment on this kind of thing, so Chen Shi wisely shut his mouth and let Gu Lao vent his dissatisfaction in his ears. Although Gu Lao's house was close to the tea house in a straight line, it still took about 10 minutes to walk over. Most of the houses in the neighborhood were Sihiyuan, and Gu Lao's house was naturally no exception. It was just that it wasn't a dignified two-entry Sihiyuan like the Qin family. "We're here," Gu Lao complained all the way. When he really stood in front of the door, he seemed to have thought of something. He quickly turned his head and solemnly said to Chen Shi, "Little Chen, let me make it clear to you first. I can't make you happy with this kind of thing. Yao Yao's ghost may be inside. Are you sure you want to go in with me? Since we're already here, of course we have to go in and take a look. Not to mention there's a big sun above us. Even if there's a ghost, it's impossible for it to appear at this time, right? After saying that, Qin Shi stretched out his hand and pointed at the sun in the sky. Gu Lao looked at his finger and was suddenly blinded by the sunlight. Okay, then let's hurry up. When we're done, we'll bring it to the tea house to eat. Seeing that the sun was shining, Gu Lao finally felt relieved. He then took out the key and opened the door of the Sihiyuan. Then, Gu Lao walked into the courtyard with Qin Shi. For some reason, the moment Qin Shi stepped into the courtyard, the sun in the sky suddenly dimmed a lot, as if a dark cloud just happened to float over and cover the sun. Gu Lao led Qin Shi straight to the main hall, and then said to Qin Shi, "Sit anywhere you want, I'll go and pour you a cup of tea first. You're always the one who invites me to tea, this time it's finally my turn to invite you," Gu Lao said as he walked out of the main hall with a kettle. After he left, Qin Shi looked at the table in the center of the main hall with interest. There were fruits and candles on the table, and next to it was a guanyin statue. If Qin Shi guessed correctly, these tributes should be used by Gu Lao to worship Gu Yao. However, he didn't want the child to know that his mother had passed away, so he put a guanyin statue next to it. There was an armchair on both sides of the table. From beginning to end, Gu Lao didn't look at the person on the chair. But there was a person sitting there. A woman. The woman was wearing a set of very ordinary home clothes, sitting quietly on the old-fashioned wooden armchair. If one looked carefully, one would find that her skin was terrifyingly white as paper. It was estimated that even an albino was not as white as her. What was even more strange was that the woman's eyes were pitch black, as if ink had dripped into her eyes. Qin Shi turned his head and glanced at the woman, nodded politely at her, and then smiled and greeted her. Chapter 332. Qin Shi looked at the woman in the central room with a smile. It was actually a bit inaccurate to call her a woman. After all, Gu Yao had been dead for more than half a year, and her body had long decayed. How could she be considered a human now? She should be a female ghost. Qin Shi nodded toward the chair, and after a polite greeting, the expression on the woman's face changed slightly. She looked no different from a real person. Although her eye sockets were dark and she didn't even have eyeballs, there was still a hint of surprise in her eyes. The woman stared straight at Qin Shi. After a long while, she finally moved her lips slightly. Immediately afterward, the woman's voice suddenly sounded in Qin Shi's mind. "You saw me?" Hearing this, Qin Shi couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. That was interesting. It turned out that not only did Gu Yao's soul not dissipate, but for some unknown reason, she also preserved some memories of her life while stabilizing her soul body. No wonder Gu Yao had been staying with the twins, but the twins acted as if nothing had happened. It was because Gu Yao was their biological mother, so even if she became a ghost, she would never hurt her children. Qin Shi didn't answer Gu Yao's words. Instead, he stood in place and looked at her with interest. This kind of behavior was actually very impolite. Even animals had territorial consciousness, let alone ghosts. Therefore, after looking at Qin Shi for a while, the darkness in Gu Yao's eye sockets became more and more intense. It was like boiling ink, as if it could splash out of the pot at any time. Sure enough. After a few breaths of time, Gu Yao slowly flew up from the chair in a very strange way, and then looked down at Qin Shi condescendingly. If one looked carefully, they would find that Gu Yao's body was not very real. It was vaguely like a projection of a 3D holographic image. The candles in the central room were curled up with smoke. Perhaps because the lights in the room were not turned on, the originally kind guanyin statue seemed to be covered with a layer of shadow. It looked a bit ferocious and terrifying. Suddenly, a gust of chilly wind blew past, and the sound of leaves rustling could be heard from outside the house. The sky suddenly became a lot gloomier. It was dark and oppressive, as if a rainstorm could suddenly fall at any time. "Leave. I won't kill you," Gu Yao's voice sounded again. However, after Qin Shi heard her words, he gently shook his head, and then thoughtfully turned to look outside the house. After a person dies, the 7 spirits disperse first. Then, the heaven's soul returns to the heavens, the earth's soul returns to the earth, and the life soul enters the cycle of reincarnation. Ghosts were formed from earthly souls, so they lacked heavenly souls and life souls. Naturally, they could not have complete personalities and thoughts like they did when they were alive. Therefore, if one wishes to deal with ghosts, one must first treat them as if they were mentally retarded. They were easily angered and irritated. At the same time, they were extremely aggressive. They would chop people up in the middle of the street if they didn't agree with them. She didn't seem to realize what he was dealing with. Therefore, the moment she turned around to look outside, Guyao was completely enraged by his actions, and went completely berserk, accompanied by an ear-piercing scream that pierced the depths of one's soul. A strong wind suddenly blew in the central room. Guyao's facial expression suddenly became particularly ferocious. Her head of black hair fluttered in the wind, and her pair of pupilless eyes were constantly oozing black blood. She was an evil ghost that had just crawled out of hell. However, She seemed to be unaware of anything, and continued to look outside the house. Guyao had already issued a warning, but she was not moved at all. Therefore, Guyao completely turned into a vengeful ghost, and fiercely pounced on Shi. Why would people be afraid of ghosts? It was because the two of them were not on the same level, and there was no way to fight back. An ordinary person holding a Guanyin bodhisattva from the night market, or chanting a few Amitabha, wanted to subdue an evil ghost with deep resentment. That was a plot that only existed in movies. Everything in the world had a spirit. From the moment Guyao turned into a ghost, she had already become a completely new life form. A life form that existed in the world in the form of energy, and was very fragile. Ghosts were more likely to come into contact with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth than humans, so ordinary people could not deal with ghost attacks at all. This was because they had no idea how the ghosts were attacking them. And if humans also came into contact with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and learned how to use it, then would ghosts still be a match for humans? It was like asking a mentally disabled person to fight with a normal person. How could the former win against the latter? Unless the latter was also mentally disabled. She was clearly not mentally disabled. Moreover, his understanding of the laws of heaven and earth was far beyond the imagination of ordinary immortal cultivators. Therefore, the moment Guyao pounced on Shi, it was as if she had crashed into a high-voltage electric net, and her entire body trembled violently. Perhaps because it was too painful, Guyao suddenly let out an ear-piercing scream, then suddenly turned into a cloud of gray smoke and flew back to the table in the central room at an even faster speed. Running? Seeing this, Shi smiled slightly, then took out the soul crystal and gently waved at the cloud of gray smoke. The gray smoke continued to churn and jump, as if it was still making its final struggle. But under the restraint of Shi's enormous true yuan, all efforts were futile. The soul crystal seemed to have turned into the purple-gold-red gourd of the golden-horned king. At Shi's command, the soul crystal directly sucked in Guyao's ghost. The cold wind came to an abrupt stop. The sun shone again, leaving a rectangular golden spot on the ground through the door frame. This central room, which was facing the south, suddenly became much more spacious and bright. She picked up the soul crystal and looked at it. There was a cloud of gray fog inside. And this was clearly Guyao's own soul. She played with the soul crystal in his hand. After a while, Gulao quickly walked back with a cup of tea. Come, have a taste of my tea. I specially brought it from other places, after the rain, it's very precious. Gulao handed the teacup to Shi, then sat aside with a smile. Shi held the teacup and took a sip, then put on an intoxicated expression, and then praised very exaggeratedly, Good. Good tea. You really have good taste. Okay? Try more. I prepared a few kilograms for you, you can take some back later. How can I accept it? Why are you being so polite with me? Don't be polite. Just take it. Gulao waved his hand generously. But the old man didn't know. Not only did Shi take his tea leaves, but she also took his daughter away. Of course. The reason why Shi did this was not to hurt Guyao, but to help her. After all, the soul crystal was the most precious treasure in the world. Even Qin Shi used the soul crystal to nourish his divine soul, so the benefits were needless to say. Ghosts were born after people died. Therefore, compared to people, ghosts were actually incomplete. Therefore, it wouldn't be long before they completely disappeared from this world. Chapter 333. Qin Shi held a teacup and chatted with Gu Lao for a while. The old man seemed to have suddenly thought of something and quickly pulled him out of the main hall. "It's getting late, let's go, it's time to cook." Looking at his anxious look, it seemed that he really didn't want Qin Shi to stay here any longer. Seeing this, Qin Shi just smiled and didn't say anything. However, when he followed Gu Lao out of the central room and went to the kitchen, Qin Shi suddenly stopped next to the large water tank in the yard, and then began to carefully look at the water tank in front of him. This kind of water tank was very common in Shangjing Sihiyuan, which was the big water tank in Sima Guang's story of smashing a tank. The large water tank in the yard, in addition to the role of water and fire prevention, was mainly for auspiciousness. The large tank was filled with water, and water made money, which meant that the family could prosper and accumulate wealth. These were old customs, and generally, only old people like Gu Lao would have this kind of thing in their house. Qin Shi stood by the water tank for a while, and no one knew what he was looking at. Seeing that he didn't move, Gu Lao stood at the kitchen door and couldn't help but urge him again. "Little Qin? What are you doing? It's already 4 o'clock, let's start quickly." "Okay, I'm coming." After hearing Gu Lao's urging, Qin Shi had to respond with a smile, and then followed Gu Lao into the kitchen. Since he wanted to taste Gu Lao's cooking, Gu Lao naturally had to cook dinner, and Qin Shi would help him prepare the dishes. Gu Lao took care of a child alone, so his cooking skills naturally wouldn't be bad. In addition, he only made some common home-cooked dishes today, so it didn't take long for a table full of dishes to fill up. Because he wanted to bring all these dishes to the tea house, Gu Lao specially found a scooter for moving goods, put all the plates and chopsticks on the scooter, and was ready to drag the scooter to the tea house. Now that it was summer, the time for the sun to set was naturally much later than before. Therefore, when Qin Shi dragged the scooter out of Gu Lao's house, it was only a little over 5 o'clock, and the bright sun was still hanging in the sky with no signs of setting. Maybe because nothing went wrong, after Gu Lao locked the door, the expression on his face became a lot more relaxed. It was obviously her own home, but she made it seem like she was in a haunted house. Even cooking a meal was frightening to her, so Qin Shi smiled and joked, "You see, I'm fine, right? Gu Yao is not an evil person with grievances. Why would she turn into an evil spirit and demand lives? If she had a soul in heaven, I think she would only protect you and your child." So, you can rest assured, after hearing Qin Shi's words, Gu Lao's face suddenly showed an expression of sudden realization. That's right, Yao Yao is such a kind person, how could she become a malicious spirit? I was being foolish. After figuring this out, Gu Lao's mood suddenly improved a lot. "How about this, I'll invite your family of 3 to have a good meal at my house tomorrow, as a thank you for taking care of the 2 of them. What do you think?" "Okay, as long as you don't need to be a cook, I'm all for it." The 2 dragged the scooter, happily chatting as they walked back. Since the house began to be haunted, Gu Lao had not let anyone enter the house. This time, Qin Shi jumped back and forth, and the old man could finally put down the big stone in his heart. Qin Shi and Gu Lao dragged the scooter back to the tea house. As soon as the door of the tea house was pushed open, the 3 little ones rushed out of the children's playground. "Papa, what are we eating today?" the little one asked Qin Shi with a shy face. Looking at the little one's cute greedy face, Qin Shi couldn't help but reach out and pinch her little face, and then opened the food cover on the scooter. "Grandpa made you a Beijing dish, do you like it?" "I like it. Grandpa's food is delicious." Before the little fellow could answer, the 2 brothers came over and chimed in. Then, the older brother came to the little one's side and said proudly, "Sister, let me tell you what this dish is." After that, he pointed to the dishes on the scooter and wanted to tell the name of the dish. But at this time, the little ones suddenly stood in front of him, and then said very proudly, "You don't need to tell me. I know what this dish is. This is Beijing sauce shredded pork." This is crystal pork knuckle. And this is mal yen meat. This is fugue chicken. Chen Shi's culinary skills were superb. Every day, she would cook different dishes for her. It could be said that this little thing had eaten all over the world, so a few classic jingbang dishes were naturally not difficult for her. Maybe it was because he had overdone it today, so while the older brother and the little one were still thinking about the name of the dish, the younger brother was standing next to them, constantly swallowing saliva. Seeing this, Chen Shi pinched the little one's little face, and then pushed the scooter into the tea house. Well, you must be hungry. You go wash your hands first, and then we'll eat. Okay. Wash my hands. I'll wash my hands first, then I'll eat first. You can't eat if you don't wash your hands. The little one reacted the fastest. As soon as she heard Chen Shi say that she wanted to wash her hands, she turned around and ran to the kitchen. After seeing her movements, the two brothers immediately followed, and at the same time, they kept shouting, "I'll wash my hands first. I'll eat first." Looking at the three lively and cute children, Gu Lao was laughing so hard that he could not close his mouth. Even Qin Ruoying could not help but shake her head with a smile, and then she asked them to run slower so that they would not fall. For a moment, this small tea house was filled with laughter and cheers. It was not the first time that the three little ones had eaten together, but when they were eating, they were competing in different ways. Who could use chopsticks better? Who could eat more dishes? Who couldn't eat rice? Perhaps this was the advantage of having children together. Everything had to be compared, and under the intentional guidance of the parents, it became a healthy competition, which made them more obedient. While the three little guys were stuffing themselves with food, 3A6 with Beijing plates suddenly stopped at the entrance of the tea house. Then, many people got out of the three cars. Among these people, there were men and women, and they dressed in completely different styles. Some of them were wearing loose sportswear, while others were wearing well-tailored suits. When they stood together, they didn't seem to match at all. Xiao Yuan was the head shopkeeper of the tea house, so she naturally knew how the tea house's business was. So when she saw so many people coming to the tea house, she could not help but frown, and whispered to Chen Shi, "Boss, these people don't seem to be here to drink tea." Chen Shi was busy wiping the oil stains on the little one's mouth. After hearing Xiao Yuan's words, he said without raising his head, "It's okay, there are a few acquaintances." As if to prove Chen Shi's words. As soon as he finished speaking, a man in sportswear came to the door of the tea house, and then very politely knocked on the door. "Hello, Mr. Chen." Hearing this, Chen Shi finally raised his head. After glancing at the people outside the tea house, the corners of his mouth curled up into a faint smile. Where was this place? This was Hohai. Under the emperor's feet. Hohai was only a street away from Zongnanhai, and Zongnanhai was where Huaxia's luck was. The dragon vein of a country gathered here, so how could it be a place to breed evil spirits? Even if it was haunted, it had to be in a different place. No wonder Gu Yao's ghost did not dissipate, so. Chapter 334. For Chen Shi, Zhonghai was a place full of memories and beautiful memories. But now, he chose to settle down in Shangjing instead of the familiar Zhonghai. One of the reasons was naturally because the spiritual energy in Shangjing was far superior to other places. One had to know that as the ancient capital of the 5 dynasties, Shangjing had always been the most important place in Huaxia. Zongnanhai was located in the center of Shangjing. It was the place where the dragon veins converged. It could be said to be a place of pure yang. Naturally, it was impossible to breed evil spirits and accept filth. Hohai was adjacent to Zongnanhai. After Guyao died in a car accident, her Yin spirit did not dissipate. Instead, it became more and more stable, and even began to condense into a soul body. This was obviously a very strange thing. Because of this, Chen Shi speculated that this matter should be deliberately manipulated behind the scenes. And if he guessed correctly, this person should want to use the geographical advantage of Zongnanhai to organize Guyao's soul body and cultivate an extremely powerful Yin servant. The Yin servant did not have a physical body, so once the Yin servant was formed, its combat power would naturally be far superior to cultivators of the same level, and even stronger than Shikigami. But what kind of place was Zongnanhai? The Wu Lian's influence spread throughout the country, and there were countless experts under their command. How could there be a mistake here? Japanese? Inyang Liao? How could it be? If the Japanese could cultivate Yin's servants in Zongnanhai, what was the difference between that and riding on Huaxia's head and shitting? Therefore, even if Qin Shi used her but to think, she knew that this matter was definitely related to Wu Lian. It was just a thief crying out to catch a thief, and a ghost crying out to catch a ghost. Moreover, this person's cultivation level was very high, and he had a high status in the Wu Lian. Otherwise, the Wu Lian would not allow him to do this in Zongnanhai. Qin Shi's guess was correct. From the cars outside the tea house, it was not difficult to see that these A6 with military license plates were all Wu Lian cars. Qin Shi didn't know who the leader was, so he didn't answer immediately. Seeing that he didn't seem to want to drive him away, the man immediately lowered his head and said politely, "Mr. Qin, my name is Ding Qingji, and I work for the General Supervision Office. The reason why I took the liberty to visit you today is because this is a very important matter, and I need to verify it with you. Can you do me a favor?" After saying that, Ding Qingji bowed slightly and made an inviting gesture. Looking at his neither servile nor overbearing attitude and full of confidence, Qin Shi guessed that this person should be at least at the level of a sister-in-law. Director of the Supervision Office? He was the official in charge of Suzhou City. This was getting interesting. A smile suddenly appeared on Qin Shi's face. After glancing at Ding Qingji, he faintly said, "It's dinner time now. If you have anything to say, wait until I eat dinner first." Qin Shi's attitude was so arrogant, but Ding Qingji's face did not show the slightest dissatisfaction. Instead, he chuckled and said, "It's my fault for disturbing you. Mr. Qin, please enjoy your meal. I'll wait for you outside." Ding Qingji looked at Qin Shi with a smile, but Qin Shi acted as if he didn't hear him. Even the little girl couldn't help glancing at him, and then looked at Qin Shi with a confused face. "Open your mouth, good girl." Qin Shi scooped up a bowl of rice with a spoon and sent it to the little girl's mouth. Hearing this, the little thing opened its mouth wide and swallowed the spoon in one gulp. As for Ding Qingji, who looked embarrassed, he pretended not to see it. Ding Qingji had no choice but to leave the tea house silently. No one knew what Ding Qingji said to the others outside, but after hearing what he said, they all went back to the cars. Qin Shi was not an impolite person. The reason why he did that was to express his dissatisfaction. He was dissatisfied with Wu Lian. Because the two brothers liked to quarrel while eating, the meal took more than half an hour. Although Gu Lao was very curious about the relationship between Qin Shi and the people outside, he knew what to ask and what not to ask, so he pretended not to see anything from beginning to end. After Qiao Yuan cleared the table, Qin Shi looked at the clock on the wall meaningfully, and then showed a meaningful smile. These people waited outside for so long, but his sister-in-law didn't call. Did she not receive the news? Or did she not inform her at all? Qin Shi pondered as he slowly walked out of the tea house. After seeing him go out, Ding Qingji hurriedly got out of the car, and then said politely to Qin Shi, "Mr. Qin, you see, this is not the place to talk. Would you like to go to the office with us?" After saying that, Ding Qingji very subtly looked into the tea house, as if to say that there were ordinary people inside, so it was not convenient to talk about a lot of things here. Ding Qingji had made it very clear, but Qin Shi had no intention of getting in the car with him. Instead, he said calmly, "If you have something to say, say it here. I don't have time to talk nonsense with you." As soon as Qin Shi's voice fell, before Ding Qingji even had time to respond, a young man in a suit pushed open the car door, and then said to Qin Shi provocatively, "Okay, then say it here." Qin Shi glanced at the young man, ignored him, and looked at Ding Qingji. Seeing that something was wrong, Ding Qingji immediately lowered his voice and said to Qin Shi, "Mr. Qin, this is Su Hongyi. His father is Su Feng, and he is a professor at the headquarters. He is in the same field as you. The Wu Lian was not a university, so naturally, there was no professor position." So what Ding Qingji meant was that Su Hongyi's father was in the same field as Qin Shi. They were not Wu Lian people, but they were willing to do something for the Wu Lian, which was equivalent to a guest in ancient times. The so-called same field meant that this person's cultivation level was equivalent to Qin Shi's. After listening to Ding Qingji's explanation, Qin Shi couldn't help but laugh. How smart was he? Just based on Ding Qingji's words, he could analyze a lot of things. You couldn't just look at the surface of things. If you just looked at the surface, things were simple. Qin Shi captured Gu Yao's ghost, but Gu Yao's ghost was a ghost servant that Su Feng put in Hohai to cultivate. So they came to the tea house with great fanfare just to ask Qin Shi to return the ghost to them. But in fact, things weren't that simple. It even involved the thoughts of the Wu Lian's higher-ups. Qin Shi and Su Feng were not Wu Lian people. They were only doing things for the Wu Lian for some reason. And what was Qin Shi's level in the Wu Lian? Above divinity, X level. Su Feng was clearly at this level. How could someone at this level of cultivation be willing to be someone else's lackey? Because they weren't Wu Lian people, the Wu Lian people had always been wary of them. Qin Shi had been waiting in the tea house for his sister-in-law's call, but the Wu Lian didn't let her call him. Which meant, the Wu Lian wanted them to solve this problem by themselves. How could they solve it? The two of them had the same status and the same cultivation level. Since the Wu Lian didn't want to be a peacemaker, it meant that the Wu Lian wanted them to fight because of this. It was a small matter, but it was important to save face. The Wu Lian would find an excuse to let the two of them compete. No matter who won, the Wu Lian wouldn't suffer any losses. On the contrary, they could use one of them to attack the other party's arrogance and warn them not to cause trouble. The Wu Lian had plenty of ways to deal with them. It had to be said that the Wu Lian's little abacus was indeed loud and clear. But the Wu Lian made a serious mistake, and that was, they didn't know Qin Shi well enough. So even though the Wu Lian knew that this would make Qin Shi unhappy, he still did it. Perhaps Qin Shi's second aunt, who was loyal to the Wu Lian and extremely utilitarian, was one of the masterminds behind the scenes. Being a guest once wasn't enough. This time, he was being used as a tool. Qin Shi didn't like this feeling. Therefore, after a long moment of silence, he opened his mouth and coldly said a sentence. And this sentence, it wasn't just for the young man, but also for Ding Qingji. Chapter 335. Scram. It was a simple word, but it accurately expressed all the thoughts in Qin Shi's mind. He didn't even bother to look at Ding Qingji and Su Hongyi. After spitting out this word, he turned around and walked towards the tea house. Mr. Qin, you, seeing this, Ding Qingji couldn't help but panic. Before he could even finish his sentence, the young man behind him was like an ignited barrel of dynamite. He was so angry that he jumped up and down in an instant. Stop right there. Perhaps because he was too agitated, Su Hongyi's attitude was really bad. After Ding Qingji turned around and glared at Su Hongyi finally realized who he was talking to, so he immediately restrained his temper. He then lowered his head slightly and said with some sincerity, "I'm sorry, Mr. Qin, I was rude." Su Hongyi lowered his head and apologized, but Qin Shi acted as if he didn't hear him. In the blink of an eye, he had already pushed open the tea house's door and was about to enter the house. Su Hongyi had no choice but to look at Qin Shi's back and hurriedly said, "Sir, please wait. This is very important. The ghost that you took away was a Yin's servant that my father carefully cultivated. He also said that if I can't find the Yin's servant, then I don't have to go back. I respect you as a senior, but I hope that for the sake of my father and Wu Lian, you won't make things difficult for a junior like me." After saying this, Su Hongyi lowered his head and bowed respectfully to Qin Shi. Face. Qin Shi finally stopped in his tracks. However, he didn't turn around. Instead, he tilted his head slightly and said to Ding Qingji, "The people from the inspector's office are guarding outside every day. Don't you know that Gu Yao is Gu Qingha's daughter? Of course we know this, but Gu Yao did die in an accident. You can verify this with old Master Gu. If that's the case, then do you know that Gu Qingha is my friend?" As soon as Qin Shi's voice fell, Ding Qingji felt an invisible pressure suddenly attack him. It was as if someone had poured a bucket of cold water over his head. In this evening when the summer heat still lingered, He felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He only felt that his entire body was cold, and his hands and feet were ice cold. Ding Qingji finally understood what it meant to be imposing without being angry. After all, this person was above the celestial realm. But now that things had come to this, he could only bite the bullet and reply, "I know." After hearing his answer, Qinshi finally turned around. He first took a deep look at Ding Qingji before shifting his gaze to Su Hongyi. After that, Qinshi asked with a calm expression, "Gu Qinghe is my friend, but you used his daughter's soul to refine a Yin's servant, so I'm puzzled, who's the one who's not giving face?" Su Hongyi was stunned. But immediately after, he was like an actor in a Sichuan opera who changed his face. Just a moment ago, he was still very respectful, but now he suddenly changed his attitude and looked at Qinshi unscrupulously. His eyes were full of provocation. Su Hongyi looked at Qinshi unscrupulously. Qinshi looked at him calmly. After a long while, Su Hongyi asked with a provocative expression, "Sir, what you mean is, today's matter can't be settled peacefully?" Qinshi couldn't help but shake her head and laugh at this display of respect. A wild dog was a wild dog after all. Even if he deliberately pretended to be submissive, it wouldn't be long before he began to bare his teeth again. Since Su Feng was above the celestial realm, he must not be young, but this Su Hongyi looked to be in his early 20s. So Qinshi was very curious, was Su Hongyi Su Feng's biological son? They were all the second generation of officials and rich people, but this one was the second generation of immortals. Nian was also a second generation, but why didn't he see her so evil and wild? It was not a problem of family upbringing. Just like the joke circulating on the internet, when Nian became an adult, Qinshi would tell her, "Nian, in fact, your parents are immortal cultivators. In order to train you, we put you among ordinary people, hoping that you can grow up healthily and happily like ordinary people. Now that you have finally grown up, in addition to telling you the truth, Mom and Dad will also teach you the most powerful cultivation technique in the immortal cultivation world. Nian, remember. From today onwards, you are the #1 second generation of immortals in the world." At the thought that Nian might become silly due to extreme shock, the corners of Qinshi's mouth couldn't help but curl up into a faint smile. After all, for a man like Qinshi who played the role of a father, no matter how old his daughter was, she would always be as lively and cute as she was today. The more Qinshi thought about it, the more Su Hongyi was still thinking about how to provoke Qinshi and at the same time, let himself escape unscathed. This was Su Feng's test for Su Hongyi. He had to control the degree of infuriating Qinshi, but not make Qinshi lose his mind and accidentally kill him. For Su Hongyi, this was a kind of test, but at the same time, it was also a kind of training. Being able to face the anger of a celestial being would be of great help to his future cultivation. Everyone present had their own ideas. However, Qinshi's next reaction was completely out of Su Hongyi's expectations. It was like basking in the sun in Hohai for the whole day, and now that the sun was about to set, it was naturally time to go home. Therefore, after looking up at the sun that was about to set, Qinshi yawned lazily, then turned and walked to the tea house. This time, Ding Qingji and Su Hongyi were both stunned. In the face of Su Hongyi's provocative words, Qinshi actually did not have any reaction. Where was the dignity of a celestial being? Where was the principle that a grandmaster should not be humiliated? Couldn't he act according to common sense? Was the script wrong? Seeing that Qinshi had already pushed open the door of the tea house, Su Hongyi finally came back to his senses and hurriedly shouted, "Mr. Qin, my father said that if you don't hand over the Yin's servant today, then the grudge is set. He will definitely pay you a visit in person another day." "Pay you a visit?" Qinshi stopped in his tracks again. After softly repeating this word, he tilted his head slightly and said with a calm expression, "He doesn't deserve it." After saying that, Qinshi's last bit of patience was exhausted, so he walked into the tea house without looking back. The door gently closed. Su Hongyi stood in place with a gloomy expression. After a long while, he finally spat on the ground and said coldly to Ding Qingji, "Director Ding, as you can see, it's not that we're looking for trouble, it's him who doesn't know what's going on." As he spoke, Su Hongyi waved at the car beside him. Then, someone quickly stepped forward and handed a letter to Su Hongyi. This is a letter of challenge. Please pass it on to him. Ding Qingji took the letter of challenge, then frowned and advised, I think this is a little inappropriate. Why don't you go back and talk to Mr. Su first? Otherwise, I can't explain it to the headquarters. Before Ding Qingji could finish, Su Hongyi waved his hand and interrupted him, then said righteously, Director Ding, there's no need to say more. This is a private matter and has nothing to do with Wu Yan. Moreover, this Chen guy was rude first. How can my father just let it go like this? Speaking of this, Su Hongyi suddenly turned his head and deliberately shouted in the direction of the tea house. Su Feng declares, Mr. Su was rude first. Today, I'm here to ask for forgiveness. This is well known to all, Le Bouchel. If Mr. Su dares to accept the challenge, we'll be waiting for you at the peak of Taihang in 3 days. Think carefully, don't regret it. Chapter 336. As soon as the words, life and death duel, came out of Su Hongyi's mouth, it was as if he had been injected with chicken blood. His face instantly became much rosier. Based on his reaction, it was not difficult to see that he was very excited. His blood was boiling, and he was inexplicably excited. In fact, this matter was not that big of a deal, because Qin Shueqing's family was the backbone of the Wu Lian people. Mr. Chen's name had long been known throughout the Wu Lian people. The Wu Lian people were respected by martial arts. Su Feng, who was also above the heavenly man level, was naturally eager to prove his strength. Mr. Chen naturally became Su Feng's best choice. As long as he defeated Qin Shi in public, Su Feng's status in the Wu Lian people would naturally skyrocket. He could even leap to become a giant who had the right to speak within the Wu Lian people. As the saying went, in a mediocre life, fame and fortune were just worldly possessions. But since ancient times, how many people could be exempt from this custom? Su Feng had descendants and apprentices. Even if it was not for himself, he had to think about his apprentices and apprentices. He had to leave his own legacy in Huaxia. But Qin Shi and Su Feng were different. In this world, there were only a few people that Qin Shi really cared about. He was like a wanderer wandering between two worlds. Wherever there was a home, that was where he belonged. Yingying and Ninian were on Earth, so Earth was his home. As for his legacy, wasn't Ninian his legacy? It was enough to have such a well-behaved, smart, and sensible daughter. Old Gu was just an ordinary person. In addition, he was old, so it was normal for him to have blurred vision. Therefore, the old man did not hear Su Hongyi shout. But just by looking at Su Hongyi's posture, old Gu knew that this junior was not saying anything good. Therefore, when Qin Shi returned to the tea house and sat down, old Gu could not wait to ask, Little Qin, who is that outside? He's a former colleague of the company. Now that the company's performance is not good, the board of directors wants to invite me back, so they sent him to persuade me. Lobbyist? Hearing this, Gu Lao frowned and looked out the window. Then, he asked doubtfully, but from the way I see it, he doesn't look like he's here to be a lobbyist. He looks like he's here to cause trouble. That's normal. If I go back, won't he have another competitor for no reason? Of course he doesn't want me to go back. After hearing Qin Shi's words, Gu Lao's face suddenly showed an expression of realization, then he nodded and said, That's true. I see that you are doing well as the owner of a small tea house, so it's better not to go back. It will be troublesome. You're right. Qin Shi and Gu Lao were chatting in the tea house. Outside the house. After Su Hongyi shouted, he stood still and waited for Qin Shi's reply. However, Qin Shi did not give any response. After a full 10 minutes, Ding Qingji finally couldn't help but ask in a low voice, Young Master Su, you see, Mr. Qin hasn't given a definite answer. This matter. Why don't we just leave it at that? Ha! Hearing this, Su Hongyi suddenly let out a sneer, then immediately shouted at the tea house again, Mr. Qin, I have delivered your message, and the letter of challenge has also been handed over to Director Ding to notarize. My father will be waiting for you at the peak of Taihang in 3 days. This battle will be watched by the world. I hope you won't miss the appointment, so as not to become a laughingstock. You're the most elegant person in Huaxia, so I'm sure you won't back down. If that's the case, I'll take my leave first. After that, Su Hongyi bowed to the tea house, then got in the car and left. From beginning to end, Chen Shi did not give any response. However, after hearing Su Hongyi's last sentence, Chen Shi couldn't help but sneer. He was being ridden on top of his head, night. The early summer night didn't have the irritability of the day, and the sudden breeze even seeped in a slight chill. The smog in Shangjing had always been very serious, but today, it sprinkled a little bit of starlight for the first time. After the little girl finished washing up, she lay on the windowsill and looked at the stars for a while, then played with Big Head for a while. Only then did she reluctantly climb into bed under Chen Shi's repeated requests. According to the usual rhythm, Chen Shi would tell her 1 or 2 short stories, and then this little thing would fall into a deep sleep. But today, for some reason, after Chen Shi told her 2 short bedtime stories, this little thing was still very energetic and kept crawling on Chen Shi and Qin Ruoying. Chen Shi had no choice but to hold her in his arms, and then gently persuade her, Nian Nian, be good, it's already 12 o'clock, you should rest early, and have enough energy to play tomorrow, okay? Hearing this little thing pouted and said coquettishly, I don't want to sleep, then what do you want to do? I don't know, the little thing shook her head blankly. But then, as if she suddenly thought of something, she quickly turned her head to the end of the bed and shouted, Big Cat. Big Cat. Come here. Big Cat was lying in the corner with its eyes closed, and after hearing the little thing's shout, it quickly jumped onto the bed. Meow. Just as Big Cat meowed, the little thing hugged it in her arms, and then put it on the pillow next to her. Big Cat, it's cold outside, don't run outside, sleep with me. I'll cover you with a quilt. As she spoke, the little thing grabbed the cold quilt and then, like Qin Ruoying, gently covered the Big Cat with the quilt. Meow. Big Cat lay on the bed and looked at the little thing with a confused expression. After this period of cultivation, it had reached the peak of wisdom, and could break through at any time, so even Chen Shi did not force it to play with the little thing recently. But today, this little thing did not know what was wrong with it. In the middle of the night, instead of sleeping, it came to ask it to sleep. Did it still need to sleep? Big Cat was wondering if it should escape, but after the little thing covered it with the quilt, she gently put her little hand on it, and then imitated Qin Ruoying's tone and said, Big Cat, be good, you're the youngest, I want to take care of you, when you fall asleep, I'll sleep. These were the words Qin Ruoying usually said to her, who would have thought that this little thing would actually apply what she learned. So, she had learned to care for others now? This was a good thing, so naturally, he would encourage her. Therefore, after Chen Shi glared fiercely at the Big Cat, it reluctantly closed its eyes, curled up into a ball next to the little thing, and pretended to be asleep. The little thing waited for a while, and when she thought that it was really asleep, she carefully covered the Big Cat with the quilt, and then obediently lay back on the bed. I'm going to sleep. Perhaps because she had experienced the joy of taking care of others, the little thing lowered her voice and said such a sentence, and was no longer naughty, but obediently closed her eyes and fell asleep. Looking at her very loving action, the couple's faces could not help but evoke a trace of a smile. It was only after the little fellow had truly fallen asleep that the day was truly over. And at this time, Qin Ruoying looked at Chen Shi and asked softly, Today's matter, what do you think? Obviously, she also heard Su Hongyi's words. Qin Ruoying was very clear about Chen Shi's strength, and naturally, she was not worried about Chen Shi's safety, so she was just casually asking. Anyway, no matter what decision Chen Shi made, she would support it. I heard that the scenery at the top of Taihang Mountain is not bad. Why don't we take Nian Nian there to see the scenery? I think that's a good idea. Then it's settled. Okay. In a few words, the couple settled this matter, and then began to discuss how to arrange the itinerary. As for Su Feng's challenge. Chapter 337. Going north to the Taihang Mountains, how difficult is it? Sheep intestines are twisted, the wheels are destroyed. How bleak are the trees, the north wind is mournful. Chao Chow's poem, Journey of the Bitter Cold, described the magnificence of the Taihang Mountains. The Taihang Mountains started north from Shangjing and extended south to Jinzhou. The 800 miles of Taihang spanned across 4 provinces. It could be said to be vast and majestic. Because of the direction of the mountains, the Taihang Mountains were higher in the north and higher in the south. The peaks were mainly concentrated in Jizhou, not far from Shangjing. It was also because of the towering peaks in the north of Taihang that it formed a completely different landscape from the south. In the depths of the mountains, one could see cliffs that looked like they were carved by knives and axes, deep and narrow canyons, and winding rivers. The road wound up the steep cliffs, going round, and gradually disappeared into the clouds. Looking down through the car window, one could see the erratic clouds in the mountains, and the lush greenery that even the fog couldn't cover. Layers of green forest, enchanting wilderness. The little girl didn't like to sit in a car because it always gave her a feeling of suffocation. Therefore, compared to a car, the little girl preferred to sit in a bus. After all, the bus was spacious and had a wide view. Sitting in the bus, one could see the beautiful scenery of the mountains. Today, they were hiking, so Qin Ruoying gave the little girl a set of children's sports clothes. Her hair was tied up in a bun, revealing a round and rosy little face. She looked particularly lively and cute. Click, 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 the little girl sat on Qin Ruoying's lap and took pictures with her mobile phone. But she didn't have a sense of beauty, so she just took pictures for fun. As long as she heard the click-click sound of the phone, the little girl couldn't help but giggle. Come to think of it, only a child's laughter could be so innocent and crisp. She came out to play for fun. And her laughter seemed to have a strange magic that could infect the people around her. As long as he heard her crisp laughter, he would feel like he had really escaped from the city, put aside his work and worries, and enjoyed life with a natural state of mind. Therefore, even though this little thing kept on making noises throughout the journey, the other passengers in the carriage didn't find her too noisy. Instead, they would turn back to look at the couple from time to time. They didn't hide the envy in their hearts at all and kept on praising this child for being so cute. It was May 24th, Wednesday. It was an ordinary Wednesday. Because it was a working day, at least 1/3 of the seats on the bus were empty. The Taihang Mountains were very long. Basically, every province had its own scenic spots. The scenic spot where Chen Shi's family was now was the one with the highest elevation among the many scenic spots, Xiaowutai Mountain Scenic Spot. Originally, they wanted to go to the highest east stage to see the scenery. However, when they came here, they heard from the management staff of the scenic spot that because of the heavy rain a few days ago, there were mudslides and landslides on the road to the east stage. Therefore, the east stage was temporarily closed. With no other choice, Chen Shi and his family could only depart from the Red Cliff Castle and follow the winding mountain path to the North Terrace, which was slightly lower than the East Terrace. They planned to camp in the North Terrace for the night before returning home. They were traveling, so naturally, they couldn't be in a hurry. The Xiaowutai Mountain was very steep. It had always been called the novice training camp for mountaineers. After setting off from the Scarlet Cliff Castle, Chen Shi let the little girl sit on his shoulders, and then he held Qin Ruoying's hand, and the family of 3 leisurely strolled through the lush green peaks. They walked slowly. At this speed, it would take at least 4 or 5 hours to climb the North Terrace. When Chen Shi finally climbed over a mountain, the view suddenly became much wider. The little girl rode on his shoulder and looked around. She couldn't help but shout excitedly, "Papa! I like it here. Blue sky, white clouds, green mountains, green water, and golden lotus flowers all over the mountains." In front of the beautiful scenery, even an ignorant child like her couldn't help but be intoxicated. And just when the little girl was excited by the beautiful scenery in front of her, East Terrace. The peak of Taihang. The Taihang Mountains in the north were very steep. The development value was far less than the 3 mountains and 5 peaks, so there were basically no buildings on the mountain. Therefore, the most original natural scenery was maintained. After climbing over the mountain and climbing to the top, looking back at the bleak place, the clouds were thousands of miles away, the mountains were thousands of layers, the sun was shining, and everything was shining. A sense of heroism rose in the chest. It was worth the trip. Unfortunately, the road to the East Terrace had been temporarily closed. This beautiful scenery was destined to not be with Qinshi's family. Although the path up the mountain had been sealed, the peak of Taihang was currently filled with people and bustling with noise and excitement. These people were naturally not hikers who came to enjoy the scenery. As early as 3 days ago, when Su Hongyi loudly read the letter of challenge outside the tea house, the whole Huaxia was shocked. For such big news, with the usual attitude of the Wu Lian, he would definitely order a ban on it. Maintaining stability, everyone was used to it. But this time was different. The Wu Lian had no intention of blocking the news at all. Instead, he allowed it to spread throughout the country in a very short time, and even the whole world. That night, countless people couldn't sleep. Even more people rushed to Taihang Mountain overnight, wanting to be the first to occupy the best viewing position in the East Terrace, hoping to see the upcoming battle with their own eyes. If they could get some inspiration from it, how would it help their future cultivation? This battle involved 2 celestial beings. One was Mr. Chen, who rose like a comet and was directly rated X by the Wu Lian. The other was Su Feng, the leader of the Yin ghost sect who had been in charge of the Southwest for hundreds of years. Celestial beings. A battle of life and death. What kind of grand event was this? Because Mr. Chen was too mysterious, no one knew who would win this battle. To be honest, if it weren't for the unreliable rumors that spread from time to time within the Wu Lian, no one was optimistic about Mr. Chen's victory. But he lived up to his reputation. Since the Wu Lian admired Mr. Chen so much, there must be something special about him, and his strength should not be underestimated. Therefore, this battle could be said to be the focus of the world's attention. There was an open space at the highest point of the East Terrace, with an area of about 10 square meters, which could be regarded as an excellent viewing platform. Those who came to watch the battle were not ordinary people, but they all tacitly stood at the mountainside, at least 100 meters away from the viewing platform. No one dared to take a step forward. No one dared to talk about it. Except for the sound of the wind, not even the sound of birds or insects could be heard. It was silent. All this was because there was one person sitting on the viewing platform. He would climb to the top and look down on all the other mountains. Facing this magnificent and beautiful scenery of the mountain peak, this person closed his eyes tightly and sat upright like a rock on the observation platform. He didn't move at all. But there was an incomparably strong force that kept flowing out of him, like a dark cloud on a cloudy day, weighing heavily on everyone's hearts. Finally, someone couldn't bear the pressure. After retreating a few hundred meters, he let out a long sigh of relief. Looking at the mountaintop, he couldn't help but sigh. Heavenly man, heavenly man. Senior Su has really reached the realm of oneness of heaven and men. Senior Su has been sitting here for 3 days, but Mr. Chen hasn't shown up. Do you think, is he arrogant, or he doesn't dare to come at all? In a battle between heavenly man, victory and defeat is only a hair's breadth away. The most important thing in a war is the right time, the right place, and the right people. Mr. Su has been sitting here for 3 days, and he has already familiarized himself with the surroundings. If Mr. Chen is going to fight, he should have come here in advance to familiarize himself with the place. The sun is about to set. Why hasn't he shown up yet? Could it be, he really doesn't dare to come? A few peak strength warriors hid on the mountainside and whispered to each other. Su Feng's letter of challenge didn't mention a specific time for the final battle, so according to tradition, as long as the sun hadn't set, the day was not over yet. If Mr. Chen still didn't show up when the sun went down, it could be assumed that he had admitted defeat. Mr. Chen is at least above the heavenly man level. I don't think he will run away before the battle, right? Otherwise, wouldn't it be a joke to be above the heavenly man level? He shouldn't run away before the battle. Maybe Mr. Chen is delayed by something. Let's wait a little longer. Anyway, there's still some time before the sun goes down. Maybe he's already on his way. Chapter 338. Why hadn't Mr. Chen come yet? This question had become a common question in everyone's heart. Did he not dare to come? Or did he not want to come? Although this was the guess in everyone's heart, no one could give an accurate answer. Someone once said that the dignity of a celestial being was more important than life. And the so-called dignity did not simply refer to face. How much was face worth? What was really important? It was the determination to push a cultivator forward. From the moment they stepped on the path of cultivation, they were destined to compete with the heavens, with the earth, and with all living things. Even if the road ahead was difficult and dangerous, they had to cut through all obstacles and press forward. Natural selection, survival of the fittest. Only by fighting for that slim chance of survival could one shed mortality and become an immortal and live freely in the world. This battle was the focus of the world's attention, and for Su Feng, it was a matter of life and death. How could he just laugh it off? Therefore, as early as 3 days ago, Su Feng had already arrived at the peak of Taihang. Then, he meditated here for 3 days, adjusting his state to the peak. Such a move not only expressed the importance he attached to this battle, but it was also a necessary tactic. The reason why Su Feng meditated here for 3 days was not because he was bored, but because he wanted his essence, energy, and spirit to be closely connected with the mountains and rivers. 3 days was enough for him to familiarize himself with the direction of every mountain peak here, the position of every tree, and even the size of every fallen rock, every flower, every leaf, every world. Every blade of grass, every tree, and every bodhi. Sitting on the right time and place, Su Feng's momentum reached its peak. Before they even fought, he had already taken the lead and gained the upper hand. This was not cheating. After all, Su Feng came here after issuing the letter of challenge. Mr. Chen could do the same. The sun rose and set and rose. The whole place was silent. Only the mountain wind kept echoing. Everyone was silently waiting for that person's arrival. Finally, the sun turned to the west. It was still emitting thousands of rays of golden light, but at the same time, it was also slowly falling. The clouds next to it were dyed rose, mixed with some gold, and looked particularly beautiful and spectacular. This was a beautiful scene that belonged to the sunset. It was different from the relaxed joy of sunrise. At sunset, people seemed to be more prone to sadness. The whole world seemed to fall into darkness at any time. The day was about to end, but Mr. Chen still did not show up. Where is it? Could it be that he really didn't dare to come? Finally, Su Feng opened his eyes and silently gazed at the setting sun on the horizon. At this moment, no one knew what he was thinking. Where was Mr. Chen? Wasn't he still busy boiling water and cooking in Beitai? Since they were camping, they naturally had to bring enough equipment, so even Qin Ruoying was carrying a big backpack today. The family of 3 chose to set up camp in a leeward location. After that, Qin Shi piled up the dry branches that he had picked up along the way. Then, when the little fellow was not paying attention, he lit the firewood with a pa sound. This time, the little thing was truly overjoyed. They were going to sleep on the mountain today. The real mountains, the real wilderness. This was not a man-made campsite like the one in Forest Park. Therefore, when Qin Shi used the portable kitchen utensils to cook, the little thing was already jumping up and down excitedly. She could not help much, so Qin Ruoying asked her to wait in the tent obediently. However, the little thing could not suppress her excitement at all and instead jumped back and forth around them. Qin Ruoying only asked if there was enough dry wood, but she actually understood. She even ran to the side of the tent and learned from Qin Shi, constantly picking up some dry branches scattered under the trees. She did not know whether these branches were suitable for firewood, so she just threw them all into the fire. If it were not for the fact that her father did not need any fuel to start a fire, this weak pile of firewood would have been smashed out by this little fellow. The conditions were limited, so Qin Shi could only make a few simple farmhouse dishes, most of which were simmering. When he was cooking, he did not forget to throw a few potatoes into the fire, ready to let the little fellow taste the taste of potatoes cooked with firewood. What was the taste of the wild? This was called the taste of the wild. Qin Ruoying spread the tablecloth outside the tent, and Qin Shi used the snack box to serve the dishes. After a while, the table was full of dishes. Looking up, the mountains in the distance were dusk, and the wilderness was quiet. The sky was the bedding, and the earth was the mat. Just like that, the family of 3 sat on the rock, facing the night breeze as they ate this not exactly exquisite but absolutely delicious camping dinner. Because the potatoes were too hot, the little fellow threw them on the ground and gently kicked them with her feet. This was the method that she taught her, which could quickly cool the potatoes. After the potato had cooled down a little, she picked it up. She didn't care how dirty the potato skin was. After tearing it open, she began to chew on it. "Papa, look, stars." Although the sun hadn't set yet, the stars were already shining in the east of the dusk. The setting sun was like fire here, and the stars were shining there. What a rare picture, the little fellow was almost stunned. "Is it beautiful?" "Yes." "Then Papa will show you a better one." After that, she suddenly raised his right hand, and then pointed to the east with his fingers like a sword. Then, a blue light suddenly rose. Like a meteor, it flashed over the little fellow's head, and then left a long shadow in the sky. "Meteor. Meteor. I know. It's a meteor." The little fellow jumped up and down excitedly. Her clear and melodious voice reverberated throughout the valley, like a cheerful bird flying freely under the boundless sky, at the same time. East Stage. The peak of Taihang. In fact, the sun had already set. But because of the refraction of the clouds, the afterglow of the setting sun could still be seen on the mountain, giving people the illusion that the sun had not set yet. Mr. Chen did not come after all. Even if people did not want to believe it, it was the truth. He was afraid of the battle. Many people came to watch the battle with a pilgrimage mentality, but they did not expect to see such a result in the end. This was something no one had expected. From today onwards, Mr. Chen's name would become Hua Xia's biggest joke. After everyone shook their heads and sighed, they finally walked down the mountain in low spirits. Only a few people were still standing in the same place, unwilling to leave. Su Hongyi stood on a large rock closest to the observation deck. When he saw the sun sink into the mountaintop, he couldn't help but smile. From this moment on, everything was different from before. Identity, status, power, as long as he, Su Hongyi, wanted it. How could he not get it? This was the real. He would climb to the top and look down on all mountains. If Su Feng was not still sitting on the observation deck, Su Hongyi would have looked up to the sky and screamed to express his excitement at the moment. Su Hongyi's excitement did not last long. Because there was a sudden exclamation from the crowd behind him. "Look! What is that? It looks like a meteor." "Bah, no. It's a sword." "A flying sword? It's so fast, it's coming, it's coming." The green light was so fast that it arrived in the blink of an eye. Like a meteor, it approached the east stage in an instant. Su Hongyi stared at the green light in a daze, and the smile on his face froze instantly. "He's coming." Just as the sun was about to set and night was about to fall, a ray of green light streaked across the sky and shot straight to the peak of Taihang. Chapter 339. The sun had already set. Just when everyone thought that Mr. Chen was not going to show up, a green light suddenly pierced through the sky, leaped over the mountains, and headed straight for the east platform from the northwest. The green light shone like a comet. But when the green light approached the peak of Taihang, people suddenly realized, this was not a shooting star, this was a flying sword that only existed in legends. At the peak of the mountains, a sword soared to the heavens. Swoosh, swoosh, a green rainbow pierced the sky. The long sword turned into a green light and suddenly flew over from afar. Although it was not close, it vaguely gave people a huge pressure. Its momentum was so strong that it was unstoppable. The sword was 3 feet and 3 inches long, the blade was like water, and it emitted a dense chill. It was as cold as the moonlight, and as bone-chilling as a cold lake. This long sword was the magic weapon that Shi had snatched from Bai Hong's hand, Flowing Cloud. Because the long sword was flying too fast, before anyone could react, the long sword had already arrived at the peak of Taihang, and the tip of the sword was pointed straight at Su Feng, who was sitting on the observation platform. Good timing. Seeing this, Su Feng let out a long howl to the sky. Then, like a giant python that had been dormant for a long time, he suddenly soared into the sky. His black robe fluttered in the wind, and for a moment, he was like a god descending to earth, facing the flying sword in the sky. However, when Su Feng soared into the sky and was ready to face the sword, he truly felt the majestic power contained in the sword. Under the sky that was not late at dusk, twilight gradually rose, and the mountain wind raged. The sword seemed to have torn the sky apart, leaving a shallow mark in the void. Wherever the long sword went, the spiritual energy at the peak of Taihang surged toward it. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth kept converging into the sword, but it gradually increased the power of the sword. In the end, this power made Su Feng feel like he was in a trance, as if he was not facing the sword, but the entire sky, the sky, had collapsed. The power of this sword was so terrifying. Su Feng's face turned cold. He did not have time to think about where this flying sword came from, and he instinctively stirred up the vitality in his body. With a loud shout, 8 Yin servants immediately appeared beside him and formed a protective circle around him. The 8 Yin servants took up the position of the 8 trigrams, each occupying a corner. At the same time, they continued to inject their own Yin Qi into Su Feng's body. In that instant, with Su Feng as the center, a shadow of the 8 trigrams suddenly appeared at the peak of Taihang, facing the green light from afar. For the past 3 days, Su Feng had been continuously absorbing the Yin Qi from the Taihang Mountains, pushing the 8 Yin servants to their peak condition. The vast and majestic Yin Qi of the mountains, as well as Su Feng's hundreds of years of hard cultivation, merged into the peak of Taixing at this moment. They slowly circulated in the void, forming an indestructible 8 trigrams formation. And this was his trump card, Yin Soldier's formation, move the mountains. Taking advantage of the right time, place, and people, gathering the power of the mountains, rivers, sun, moon, and yin and yang, he faced this world-shaking sword head-on. This was a powerful force that only those above the celestial being realm could control. It was also a power that ordinary people could never imagine. Therefore, no matter who won or lost in this battle, it could definitely be said to be an unprecedented battle. And the moment Su Feng revealed the Taiji diagram, the flying sword finally arrived in front of Su Feng. Like the sonic boom caused by the flight of a supersonic fighter, the moment the longsword hit the Taiji diagram, with the point of impact as the center of the circle, a burst of white air suddenly erupted, its power monstrous. The invisible air wave carried a powerful impact, instantly turning the stones on the observation deck into dust. At the same time, the air wave also uprooted all the trees on the mountain. For a moment, the peak of Taihang was filled with dust and dirt, as if it had been hit by a Force 12 typhoon. Su Hongyi was standing closest to it, so the moment the air wave hit, he was sent flying by the powerful shock wave, and then rolled along the hillside. After rolling for a few hundred meters, he finally hit a big rock and stopped. Gravel and dust constantly fell on Su Hongyi, and in a short while, he was buried alive. Similar scenes kept playing out. No one had seen a battle between those above the celestial being realm, so they didn't know what the safe zone was. If it weren't for Wu Lian's consideration of not letting everyone get too close, the peak of Taihang would have been dyed red with blood today. And this was based on the situation where Su Feng flew into the sky and took the sword head-on. If Su Feng was still standing on the observation deck, this sword, wouldn't it have shaved the mountain? The lucky ones with lower cultivation were standing farther away in advance, and after the explosion, they ran faster than anyone else, so they were not injured because of this. By the time they looked at the viewing area in shock, they realized that everything had already been settled. The air wave dissipated. Su Feng was still flying in the air. But his black robe was torn to shreds by the air wave, and from afar, he looked like a rag doll. As for the Taiji diagram, it had already turned into a light smoke, dissipating at the peak of Taihang. Su Feng didn't seem to be injured. That was because the flying sword suddenly stopped in the air after breaking the Taiji diagram. The blue light around the long sword had already dissipated. If it weren't for the fact that it was still floating quietly in the air, it wouldn't have looked much different from an ordinary long sword. However, although there were no visible wounds on Su Feng's body, most of his primordial chi had been shaken away. Like an old man whose body had been hollowed out, Su Feng stared blankly at this long sword that was right in front of him. He actually couldn't maintain his high void wind resistant state, falling straight down from the sky just like that. Bang! With a muffled sound, Su Feng crashed heavily into the ground. But right after that, he crawled up from the ground shakily. Su Feng half knelt on the ground, trying to raise his head. In addition to shock, fear, there was also some disbelief in his eyes. One sword. Only one sword. He couldn't even take one sword from Mr. Chen. From beginning to end, Mr. Chen had never shown his face. With only one flying sword, he had cut off half of his cultivation and completely turned him into a cripple. Su Feng stared blankly at the flying sword in the sky. Suddenly, the sword vibrated slightly. After seeing this scene, Su Feng suddenly felt as if he had been struck by lightning. The expression on his face suddenly became extremely nervous and frightened. So, after a shudder, Su Feng suddenly lay on the ground, his forehead pressed against the soil, and shouted in a trembling voice, "Thank you, Mr. Chen, for sparing my life. Thank you, Mr. Chen, for sparing my life. Thank you, Mr. Chen, for sparing my life." After Su Feng shouted 3 times, he even raised his head and kowtowed heavily on the ground 3 times. When the few martial artists who were not affected by the blast saw this scene, they were immediately dumbfounded. Even their eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. What happened just now? Su Tianren lost? And he was so scared that he knelt down and begged for mercy? This, after being stunned for a moment, a smarter guy suddenly came back to his senses and couldn't help but shout excitedly, "I understand. The reason why Chen Xian only attacked after the sun went down, that's because he didn't take Su Tianren seriously at all. Su Feng doesn't deserve to fight with him at all." Hearing this, the rest of the people suddenly had a look of realization and hurriedly nodded in agreement. Yes, that's it. But what I don't understand is, Su Tianren is also above the celestial being level, but he couldn't even take one sword from Mr. Chen. Then, what realm should Mr. Chen be in? No one could answer this question. Everyone looked at the sky again. After Su Feng kowtowed 3 times, the sword turned into a green light again and flew back along the way it came. In the blink of an eye, it completely disappeared into the horizon. The mountain wind was still whistling. But in the blink of an eye, the peak of Taihang had completely changed. Chapter 340. The farce finally came to an end. In fact, whether it was Su Feng or the onlookers present, any thoughts or opinions of them were meaningless to Qin Shi. The reason why he showed off his skills today was mainly to remind Wu Yan, "What you saw was only a part of me." From beginning to end, Wu Yan had never really understood Qin Shi. As for the others, if it weren't for Qin Shi's photographic memory, he probably wouldn't even remember the names of Su Feng and Su Hongyi, let alone the others. Anyway, no matter who or what, in short, there was only one sentence: I didn't care. There was a lot of noise in the east platform, but the north platform was still a peaceful scene in the mountains. The night breeze was gentle, and the stars were twinkling. This time, Qin Shi had specially brought a skylight tent. The whole family lay in the tent and looked up at the bright starry sky. That warm and comfortable feeling made the little guy let out comfortable moans through his nose. She didn't want to say anything. She just kept climbing up and down on Qin Shi and Qin Ruoying, using her parents' bodies as a cushion. It was soft, and very comfortable. The next morning, when the sun just peeked out from the top of the mountain in the distance, the little girl yawned and got out of the tent. After a simple wash, Qin Shi took her to the top of the mountain and looked into the distance. The green mountains in the distance were dark and misty. Far away from the smog of Shangjing, large clouds floated gently on the top of the mountain. Seeing such a beautiful scene, the little girl excitedly ran on the grass. Children at this age were always innocent and beautiful, like a flawless gem, pure and dazzling. She grinned and laughed, like a butterfly swimming in the flowers. Accompanied by the beautiful morning sun, her laughter resounded throughout the mountain. "Nian Nian, be careful of the stones under your feet. Don't fall." After packing up the tent, the little girl still didn't want to leave. Qin Ruoying stood aside and watched her run freely on the grass. This was the fruit of her and Chen Shi's love, the baby she gave birth to after 10 months of pregnancy. Therefore, whenever she saw Ninian giggling happily, Qin Ruoying's mouth would always reveal a faint smile. Qin Ruoying quietly accompanied the little fellow. Chen Shi, who was still packing, suddenly turned his head and looked at her quietly. The woman in front of him, whose heart was as simple as a simple flower, was still as moving as ever. Falling flowers are silent, people are as indifferent as chrysanthemums. The beauty of a book can be read. He reckoned that he wouldn't be able to finish reading Qin Ruoying's book in his lifetime. Chen Shi looked at Qin Ruoying quietly, while Qin Ruoying looked at the little fellow quietly. This scene was very similar to the hazy mood described by Bian Jilin in Cliffhanger. You stand on the bridge and look at the scenery. The sightseer is looking at you from upstairs. The moon adorns thy windows, you decorate other people's dreams. And you are my dream. When the family of 3 returned to Scarlet Cliff Castle and got on the bus again, it was already 4:00 in the afternoon. The short trip to Taihang ended in such a joyful atmosphere. Although the little fellow still wanted to continue, when she thought of the 2 brothers who were still waiting for her in the tea house, she couldn't wait to fly back to Shangjing. Because she could show off in front of them again. This little fellow was still young, but she especially enjoyed the feeling of being envied. And the 2 brothers gave in to her, so every time she showed off, even if they weren't interested, they would try their best to look extremely envious. Thinking about it, it was quite difficult for the 2 of them. In the past, when Auntie Zhang took care of Ninian, the child was a careful and cautious mimosa. Now that she had been with her parents for a long time, the mimosa had become a little daisy commonly seen on the roadside. Lively and cute, she wasn't weak and delicate like the precious flowers. Chen Shi was very satisfied with this. The bus soon arrived at Shangjing. As soon as they walked out of the bus station, Chen Shi took the little fellow to the parking lot. Before he could reach out to call a taxi, 2 girls in their early 20s suddenly ran in front of him and excitedly pointed at the little fellow and said, "Hello, is this your daughter?" The 2 girls were quite good-looking. Big eyes, sharp chins, and high noses. They were the most popular faces on the internet. The 2 of them wore sports vests that exposed their navel and a pair of tight-fitting sports pants, which perfectly displayed the advantages of their figures. Yes, what's the matter? Chen Shi had always been very polite to ordinary people, so he simply nodded. Brother, it's like this. We saw that your daughter is so cute, so we want to ask her to take a short video with us. Just 15 seconds, is that okay? Short video? The waves of the internet came one after another, so old antiques like Chen Shi were naturally eliminated a long time ago. However, when Qin Ruoying heard the little girl mention the 3 words, short video, she couldn't help but smile and explain, they should be talking about TikTok. Oh, yes, TikTok. Seeing that Qin Ruoying seemed to have some understanding of this, the little girl quickly took out her phone and showed her homepage to Chen Shi. She also specifically pointed at her number of fans, which was more than 400,000, which was quite good. We want to dance a grade dance with our sister. Look, it's this video. There are only 2 or 3 movements, it's very simple. Chen Shi looked at it and found that it was indeed very simple. He looked down at the little fellow and asked, Nian, sister wants to dance with you, are you willing? Hearing this, the little fellow seemed to be a little shy. She quickly hid half of her body behind Chen Shi. After she felt that she was safe, she poked her head out and glanced at the phone screen that the little girl handed over. Sister, don't be afraid. Look, it's just a few movements. You only need to do it once with us. The little fellow shrunk behind Chen Shi timidly. She seemed to be a little unwilling. However, Chen Shi knew the little fellow's character very well. It was not an exaggeration to say that this little fellow only needed to blink her eyes and he already knew what she was thinking. With her current reaction, it was not that she did not want to, but she did not dare. Seeing that there were people coming and going at the station, the little fellow would more or less be a little shy. In this case, Chen Shi, as a father, naturally had to encourage her more. Just play for fun, treat it as entertainment, and train her courage at the same time. It was a good thing. Therefore, Chin-shi squatted beside the little fellow and persuaded her for a while. Father's words were always useful, so after hesitating for a while, the little fellow mustered up her courage and nodded. Then, she walked out timidly. The movements were indeed very simple. It took a total of 15 seconds. Excluding the head and the tail, it probably took less than 10 seconds to actually jump up. Therefore, after the two girls demonstrated it in slow motion, the little fellow remembered most of it. Although she remembered the movements, she did not immediately start. Instead, she pouted and said to Chin-shi, "Papa, you dance first. I'll dance after you." "I'll dance?" Chin-shi looked at the little fellow helplessly, but when he saw her serious face, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. Seeing this, Chin-roying not only did not help Chin-shi, but also added fuel to the fire. Just dance for her to see. If you don't dance, how would she dare to dance? Chapter 341. Dancing. For Chin-shi, dancing was not a difficult task. It was nothing more than making one move after another according to the rhythm of the music. But when she thought about how he was going to perform a web celebrity dance in such a crowded place, Chin-shi felt a little weird. It made her feel like her limbs were becoming a little clumsy. At the end of the day, it was still a psychological barrier. However, when he looked at his wife and children's expectant eyes, Chin-shi decided to go all out. As for his reputation, could it be eaten? As a result, such a scene played out outside the busy Shangjing station. A man in a mountaineering suit danced the ash dance with the company of two sexy and hot internet celebrities. Looking at his standard movements, he looked like a professionally trained dancer. Chin-shi seemed to be in a good mood today, so after he finished dancing, he even imitated the handsome pose of a celebrity and winked at Chin-roying with a domineering expression. On the spot, Chin-roying was so happy that she couldn't stand up straight. "Daddy is so amazing." Chin-roying couldn't stop laughing, but the little girl was obviously shocked by her daddy's handsomeness. Therefore, when she finished watching Chin-shi's demonstration, the little girl couldn't wait to jump in front of the camera. Then, she imitated Chin-shi's left and right hand gestures. Her little face was so happy that it was about to bloom. She was a child, so she didn't need to do anything. As long as she showed a pure smile and was happy from the bottom of her heart in front of the camera, she would naturally receive countless likes. The 15-second video was quickly recorded, but the little girl couldn't stop at all. It was as if she had eaten ecstasy and was completely high. "Mommy, you too." The little guy ran to Chin-roying's side and pulled her along, wanting her to jump with him. Chin-roying couldn't persuade her, so in the end, she could only smile bitterly and dance with her. The two girls had picked up a treasure today. Just Chin-shi and his wife's photos alone were enough to win an international photography award, not to mention that they were a family of 3 now. The family of 3 was having a good time here, attracting the attention of the passers-by. Many people even stopped and took out their mobile phones to take pictures. Seeing that there were more and more onlookers, Chin-shi thought about it again and again, and had to stop the little fellow's excitement. After letting her say hello to the two sisters, he took her and left directly. Seeing this, the little girl hurriedly caught up with Chin-shi and wanted to leave his WeChat account, hoping that they could take videos together in the future. However, she was decisively rejected by Chin-shi. After all, he had no intention of letting Nyan become an internet celebrity. It was fine to play around, but not when it came to other things. This was a matter of principle. Thus, the two girls could only stand by the roadside and watch regretfully as the money tree got further and further away from them. Although they had left, the little fellow still hadn't woken up from the extremely magical background music. Thus, she kept pestering Chin-roying to play music for her. Then, she started wriggling excitedly in the car. Looking at her smug look, it was probably the long-hidden nature of the country high that had been activated for a long time. Because of the delay at the station, when the family of 3 returned to Dongming Alley, it was already 7:00 in the evening. As soon as she stepped through the door, the little fellow rushed into the courtyard with her butt up, and at the same time, she kept shouting, Big cat. Big cat. Come quickly. I'll teach you how to dance. Before the word dance left her mouth, the little fellow suddenly stopped in her tracks. After being stunned for a moment, she looked at the figure next to her and exclaimed, "Auntie, you're back?" Chen Shi and Qin Ruoying heard the commotion in the courtyard, and they couldn't help but smile at each other, and then they crossed the Chuehua gate side by side. Wasn't the figure standing on the steps of the east wing Qin Shueqing, whom they hadn't seen for a long time? His sister-in-law was still elegant, but the most eye-catching thing was her right hand. "Oh, your hand has recovered? So fast?" Chen Shi looked at Qin Shueqing in astonishment. He really didn't expect her to be able to step into the golden core stage in such a short time. Although his sister-in-law's martial arts foundation was not bad, this speed of progress, it seemed a little too fast. While Chen Shi was still puzzled, Qin Shueqing calmly explained to him. "The organization recently found some rare elixirs. My qualifications are not bad, so I got the priority to use them. With the help of the elixirs, I rushed to the Heavenly Man stage in one go." Rare elixirs? Chen Shi repeated it, and suddenly he had some understanding in his heart. As the spiritual qi of heaven and earth became more and more intense, some precious treasures of heaven and earth would naturally be born. With the power of Hua Xia, it was not difficult to collect these rare treasures. His sister-in-law was young, had a solid foundation, and good qualifications. In addition, she was originally a great guru at the peak of the Gang realm. After practicing the practice method Chen Shi gave her, she naturally made rapid progress. Therefore, even without the help of external forces, it was estimated that she could soon break through to the Heavenly Man stage. The Heavenly Man was just a pseudo-elixir stage. Only those above the Heavenly Man could barely be regarded as the Golden Core stage. In the blink of an eye, his sister-in-law had reached the Golden Core stage. It had to be said, time really passed quickly. "You haven't been home recently. What have you been busy with?" Qin Ruoying also hadn't seen Qin Shueqing for a long time. Now that she suddenly saw her back and her injuries had recovered, Qin Ruoying naturally felt happy for her from the bottom of her heart. Therefore, after handing the luggage to Chen Shi, Qin Ruoying stepped forward and pulled Qin Shueqing to talk. His wife wanted to catch up with his sister-in-law. As her brother-in-law, Chen Shi naturally didn't want to disturb them. So after taking the luggage, he asked the little fellow to go back to the room to wash her face and change her clothes. But the little fellow didn't pay attention to him. As soon as the big cat came over, the little fellow ran straight to the fish tank with the big cat in her arms. Then, under her leadership, the cat and the fish shook crazily to the music from the mobile phone. Left, right, forward, backward, the little fellow led the dance in front. The big cat squatted on the ground and waved its paws. Big head floated in the fish tank and shook its head and tail. Looking at their silly looks, Chen Shi could only shake his head with a smile. Then, he went to the kitchen alone to prepare dinner. While cooking, Chen Shi also pondered about his sister-in-law's sudden return. Actually, even if he used his butt to think, he knew that Qin Wanqing was being used by Wu Lian again. The Wu Lian successfully made Chen Shi reveal the tip of the iceberg through Su Feng's provocation. When they finally realized Chen Shi's potential, they immediately transferred their sister-in-law back. They were afraid that Chen Shi would vent his anger on them. On the other hand, they wanted to let Chen Shi see with his own eyes that the Wu Lian would never treat his own people badly. So, they let their sister-in-law get a big bargain. Otherwise, how could they let her use this kind of heaven and earth treasure, which was very helpful for cultivation? As a large organization with an official background, this kind of decision was naturally right. But this kind of behavior made Chen Shi very disgusted. If it was useful, they would hold you in high regard. If it was useless, they would immediately throw you aside, too utilitarian. Chen Shi didn't want to deal with the Wu Lian anymore. So, he decisively put this problem to the back of his mind and turned to think about another problem. If he didn't remember wrongly, Bai Hong once said that the divine gate would open again in a month at most. Chapter 342. Life was back on track again. It was so peaceful that not a single ripple could be felt. The only thing that made Qin feel a little uncomfortable was, the little girl was addicted to the phone after all. Since the last short video, the little thing wanted to play with it from time to time. Although the brothers were not naughty, they were definitely the most enthusiastic audience. They would always give the warmest applause to the little girl at the end of her performance. In the long run, it also indirectly encouraged the little girl's self-confidence, which led to her clamoring to play music on the phone at all times. Qin had always been reluctant to let the little girl touch the phone, but he could not resist her reasonable request. Dancing was a good thing after all, so naturally, he could only let her be. To be on the safe side, Qin also specifically deleted most of the software on the phone, leaving only the system's music player. But how smart were the children nowadays? When Qin put the phone aside to play music for the little girl, the brothers could not help but fiddle with it. After all, they had been yearning for magical toys like the phone for a long time. Therefore, even if Qin had made enough precautions, she still could not stop the brothers from fiddling with it. It did not matter if they were young and illiterate. Anyway, they would always find something new. Therefore, the door to a new world was poked open by them one by one. Aunt Zhang and Gu Lao's years of suppression were finally released. For children, how fun were games? Just one look at the picture and the brothers were completely fascinated. Under the leadership of these two bad friends, the little girl was no longer naughty and became addicted to playing games on the phone. When Qin found out and wanted to stop her, she started crying and throwing a tantrum on the spot, refusing to put down the phone in her hand. The phone is fun. I want to play with the phone. I don't want toys. I want to play with the phone. This time, Qin was at his wit's end. Pandora's box had been opened, and it was basically impossible to close it again, unless their memories of this period were erased. But Nian was his daughter after all, and the child was still so young. How could Qin bear to use magic to forcibly erase her memory? What's more, it was already the era of the mobile internet. Mobile phones had become a necessity in life. No matter how much one tried to prevent it, the child would come into contact with a mobile phone one day. Therefore, the only thing Qin could do now was to set some rules with this little thing and set a time limit for it to play every day. It's okay to play with your phone, but you have to learn self-control first. This was more important than anything else. It was precisely because of this that how to cultivate Nian's self-control became Qin's top priority. For this reason, Qin didn't even have time to play chess with Gu Lao. Almost every day, he would try to find some fun things to do, such as boating, fishing, flying kites, and other outdoor activities. Qin only hoped that this could distract the little girl's attention, so that she would not hold the phone all day long. The hearts of all parents in the world, just like that, the days passed by one by one. While Qin was busy taking care of the child, he did not completely idle. Instead, he took the time to do something bad. And that was, including the Sundial Brilliance Temple, the 5 temples left by the Taiqing divine ancestor were all demolished. By searching the memories in Bai Heng's mind, Qin found the remaining 4 temples and wantonly destroyed them. The escape route left by the Taiqing divine ancestor for the ancient cultivators was blocked by him just like that, and the reason why Qin did this was mainly because the divine gate was always an uncertain factor. He did not like this feeling very much, as if someone would emerge from the divine gate at any time. And last time when the divine gate closed, Qin had already noticed an extremely powerful aura from it. The unknown represented danger. It was not that Qin was afraid, but he did not want his family to face any danger. Not even a little bit. The ancient cultivators had left for too long. After so many years of evolution, the earth had long changed. They were no longer suitable for this era. This was the modern era. Not the ancient mythological era. So after thinking for a long time, Qin finally made such a selfish decision. He destroyed all the temples that served as coordinates and completely blocked the ancient cultivators' return route, so that they would obediently stay in the great world and not come out to cause trouble from time to time. Whether it was out of selfishness or to protect the Earth's existing environment, this decision was obviously the most correct. To be honest, when he demolished the Sundial Brilliance Temple, it really made Chen Shi's heart ache. He destroyed an excellent cultivation place with an 8 times faster time flow just like that. In fact, ever since Bai Hong revealed the information about the 5 temples, Chen Shi roughly understood why the time flow in the Sundial Brilliance Temple was different from that of the Earth. It was because the Sundial Brilliance Temple was connected to the Great World, so the time flow in the temple was actually the time flow in the Great World. In addition, Chen Shi guessed that there should be another Sundial Brilliance Temple in the Great World. Just like there was a receiver at both ends of the phone, the temple on Earth was just a child temple, and the temple in the Great World was the mother temple. In order to confirm whether destroying the temple could really cut off the connection between the Great World and the Earth, Chen Shi recently paid special attention to the fluctuation of the spirit qi of heaven and earth. June 1st, Children's Day. On this holiday that only belonged to children, the fog that covered the sky finally appeared again. The scale of the spirit qi tide this time was indeed very large. As long as it was a place with a little bit of spirit qi, there was now fog everywhere. The fog covered the sun, like a summer shower, and the whole sky was so gloomy that it seemed like it was about to drip water. Chen Shi was not sure where the divine gate would appear, so after saying goodbye to Qin Ruoying, he left the tea house and then patrolled in the direction of the spirit qi surge, wanting to see if the divine gate would appear again. The fog lasted for more than an hour. Chen Shi flew more than half of Huaxia, but in the end, he did not find any trace of the divine gate's appearance, and his heart immediately calmed down. The spirit qi tide had begun to weaken, and it seemed that the divine gate would not appear again. Thinking of this, Chen Shi's heart suddenly calmed down a lot, so he turned his head and flew back to Shangjing. And just as he was about to go home, Qin Ruoying, who was playing games with the little guy in the tea house, suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. She didn't even have the time to react before a feeling of the world spinning violently surged out. The scene in front of her blurred, and Qin Ruoying seemed to have lost her strength, and she could not even stand steadily. If she had not grabbed the chair next to her in time, she would have fallen directly to the ground. Qin Ruoying had no choice but to tightly grab the back of the chair next to her, and then carefully sit down to rest for a while. After she felt a little better, Qin Ruoying frowned slightly and began to check her own situation. In any case, she was a foundation establishment stage cultivator, so how could she still feel dizzy and blurred vision? This feeling had already appeared once before, and Chen Shi carefully checked for her at that time, but he did not find any problems, so Qin Ruoying did not take it to heart. But now this feeling appeared again. Chapter 343. For a foundation establishment stage cultivator to frequently experience dizziness and blurred vision, this was clearly a very strange thing. Therefore, when Chen Shi came back, Qin Ruoying immediately told Chen Shi about this matter. When she said this, Chen Shi immediately exploded like a big cat. Gu Lao greeted him with a smile, but his face was cold. He didn't even respond and directly pulled Qin Ruoying to the back kitchen of the tea house. Chen Shi couldn't be blamed for losing his composure. After all, there weren't many things in this world that were worthy of his attention. If something really happened to Qin Ruoying, Chen Shi was afraid that he would go berserk on the spot. He would never be as harmless as before, but it was strange. Although Qin Ruoying's aptitude was average, in any case, she was now able to cultivate, right? Her earth soul had returned to her body. In the case of 3 complete souls, how could she fall ill? Not to mention what realm Qin Ruoying's cultivation had reached, even if she really did have some kind of strange illness, Chen Shi, as the best doctor in the world, wouldn't be able to find the problem. Due to all kinds of worries, Chen Shi was really nervous this time. Where did the problem come from? Out of caution, Chen Shi first used the amplification effect of the soul crystal to greatly increase the strength of his divine soul. Only then did he release his divine sense to carefully investigate Qin Ruoying's body. There was no problem with the body's organs, 5 viscera, 6 bowels, and 8 major systems. Since the whole person was healthy, the problem was obviously in the divine soul. Therefore, Chen Shi gave the soul crystal to Qin Ruoying, and then let her try to let her divine soul out of her body. Perhaps it was because Qin Ruoying's current cultivation was too low, so even if he used the soul crystal to force her divine soul out of her body, Chen Shi couldn't see anything wrong with her divine soul. From the perspective of an immortal cultivator, the soul was the most important organ in the human body. Without the soul, a human would be nothing more than a walking corpse. An ordinary person's soul was hidden in their heart aperture. Only after they had successfully cultivated could their soul leave their heart aperture and completely merge with their yuanying, becoming the second life of the cultivator. As long as yuanying did not die, her spirit would not be destroyed. That was why there was the saying of possession and rebirth. The heart aperture was where the soul was stored. It was also the most mysterious and important part of the human body. Since he could not find any problems with the divine soul, Qinshi speculated that the problem should lie here. Therefore, he was now faced with a choice, and that was, should he allow his spirit to enter Qin Ruoying's heart aperture? Qinshi had never tried to let his spirit enter someone else's heart aperture. After all, what was the difference between this and possession? He believed that other than Qin Ruoying, there was absolutely no one in this world who would let him enter their heart aperture without reservation. Qinshi was somewhat apprehensive, because the difference in their cultivation was too great. If Qin Ruoying's divine soul was a small pond, then Qinshi was the boundless ocean. What would happen if he poured the water from the ocean into a small pond? Qinshi had never heard of such a situation, so naturally he had never seen it before. Therefore, not to mention trying it out, just imagining it made him somewhat fearful. Qin Ruoying was the most important person in his life. If something went wrong and hurt her heart aperture, Qinshi was afraid that he could only commit suicide to apologize to the world. What to do? He couldn't advance or retreat. For a moment, Qinshi was stunned. Qin Ruoying saw Qinshi's worry, so after thinking about it again and again, she said gently, "Don't worry so much. You see, I'm fine now." "It shouldn't be a big problem," Qinshi did not immediately reply. After a long silence, he said with a dignified face, "No, this matter is not simple. We must find the problem." After saying that, he wanted to use the soul crystal to check Qin Ruoying's divine soul again. But at this moment, the little girl suddenly ran over with her phone in her arms. "Mama! The phone is ringing. The phone is ringing." Although she was illiterate, she could still distinguish between ringtones and music, so she ran to Qin Ruoying's side and held the phone high as if she was presenting a treasure. Qin Ruoying took the phone and found that she did not receive a phone call, but a text message. The sender was Qin Yongyan, and the content was very short. The general meaning was that he had something to do and was going out for a while, so the couple did not have to worry. Qin Yongyan had always lived in seclusion. Today, he went out for the first time, which made Qin Ruoying feel a little strange. However, the elders naturally did not need to report to the younger generation, so she did not take this matter to heart. After showing it to Qinshi, she returned the phone to the little girl. The little girl was busy playing games. She took the phone and ran out of the hall. But just after she ran 2 steps, she seemed to have thought of something. She quickly turned her head and asked with a puzzled face, "Mama, what are you doing here?" "Mama is talking to Papa about the purchase of goods." "Oh." The little girl nodded woodenly, but her legs seemed to be rooted to the ground, and she stood there motionless. With her current reaction, Qinshi did not need to think to know that the little girl wanted them to go out and keep her company because they had not come out for a long time. This made Qinshi feel very gratified. Games were not as important as parents, meanwhile. East Sea. On an unknown island. Just like the ice and fire island described by Mr. Jin Yong, it was full of spiritual energy and full of vitality. The scenery on the island was even more beautiful, like a fairyland. Such an excellent tourist spot, but so far, few people knew about it. No one had set foot on it all year round. This island was the legendary East Sea Immortal Mountain, Diyu Island. The reason why ordinary people could not find this island was that there was a large array on the island that gathered spiritual energy, defended it, and concealed it. The ancient cultivators had left, but their inheritance was left behind. The village hidden in the depths of Qinling was the place of inheritance, but there was more than one place of inheritance in this world. Diyu Island was one of them. Diyu Island was also a place of inheritance, but there was a big difference between Diyu Island and All Saints Valley. All Saints Valley was run by the clan elders. As long as foreign cultivators passed the test of the clan elders, they could join All Saints Valley and officially become a member of the village. The two words, Fang Cun, carved on the stone tablet outside the village were the foundation of the village. Shape does not exist, Fang Cun accepts. All rivers run into the sea. All Saints Valley was very inclusive, so whether it was martial artists, necromancers, or other inheritances, everyone could live in harmony in the village and learn from each other in order to break through to the diviner level as soon as possible, or even ascend to the divine gate. Compared to All Saints Valley, Diyu Island was more mysterious and naturally more isolated. It did not accept outsiders and was never open to the outside world, so the residents of the island had always had the same surname. They were of the same clan and had been passed down from generation to generation. Chapter 344. East Sea Immortal Mountain, Diyu Island. Diyu Island was not an isolated island, but a group of more than 10 small islands. It was like a county with more than 10 villages under its jurisdiction. 17 small islands were scattered randomly on the sea. Although the islands were not connected, they were not very far apart either. As far as the eye could see, it was all clear and transparent seawater, fine golden beaches, and lush forests. This place was like a pure land that had never been polluted by industry. Everything was so beautiful. In such a paradise, it was natural that it would be flourishing and flourishing. Therefore, the residents of the island all had the same surname, Jiang. One had to know that the origin of surnames could be traced back to the birth of new humans. At that time, humans were still in a matriarchal system, so many surnames had the word woman in them. Jiang was one of the 8 great ancient surnames. Ever since the ancient cultivators left, the Jiang clansmen left on Earth had sealed themselves on Diyu Island. If not for the serious dangers of close kin reproduction and the need to inject new blood into the clan from time to time, the Jiang clan would never allow any outsiders to set foot on Diyu Island. It was precisely because the Jiang clan had followed the ancestral teachings of seclusion for so many years that the Jiang clan's inheritance was extremely complete. This had become the thing that the Jiang clan was most proud of. Just like the rumors in the outside world, they were what the ordinary cultivators were talking about, descendants of immortals. However, due to the gradual weakening of Earth's spirit energy, even the ancient cultivators could only stay away from it, let alone these abandoned children left behind on Earth. Therefore, rather than saying that the Jiang clan was conserving their strength, it was better to say that they were struggling at death's door here. At their worst, there was not even a single immortal in the entire Jiang clan. However, this was all in the past. With the gradual recovery of spirit energy, the Jiang clan was about to welcome its most glorious moment. The current clan leader, Jiang Yuankui, was very confident about this. On this day, Jiang Yuankui was handling clan affairs in the ancestral hall of Qixia Peak when a clan disciple suddenly came to report, interrupting his train of thought. Clan leader, someone wants to see you. Who is it? This person is from the All Saints Valley. His name is Qin Yongyan. All Saints Valley? Wasn't it destroyed long ago? Jiang Yuankui repeated this phrase, and a faint smile appeared on his face. It was obvious that there had been some unpleasantness between Diyu Island and All Saints Valley. Jiang Yuankui pondered for a moment, then coldly said to the messenger, "It seems that those old things are really dead. Now, a junior of the young generation wants to see me? Tell him to scram." Hearing this, the messenger had an extremely awkward expression on his face. After a moment of hesitation, he said cautiously, "Sir, that person also said that, he is Mr. Chen's father-in-law, Mr. Chen?" Jiang Yuankui froze for a moment. Then, he seemed to think of something, but he wasn't sure. He frowned and asked, "Which Mr. Chen?" "He's the one who soared to immortality with a single sword strike in Taihang Mountain." Jiang Yuankui was silent. After a long moment of silence, he said solemnly, "Tell him to come see me." "Yes, Patriarch." At the foot of Qixia Peak, Qin Yongyan stood proudly in front of the mountain gate in a plain robe. Although it was called a peak, it was actually only a few dozen meters high. From afar, one could see the cornice of the ancestral shrine at the top of the mountain. Perhaps it was because no stranger had appeared on Diyu Island for a long time, so when Qin Yongyan stood there, countless Jiang family members couldn't help but come to take a look. Qin Yongyan was like an old monk in meditation. After standing there for more than 10 minutes, the Jiang clan member who went to deliver the message hurriedly rushed over. "Mr. Qin, please come with me." Then, the man led Qin Yongyan to the square outside the ancestral shrine. Qin Yongyan had been silent the whole time, but when he arrived at the square, he set his eyes on the giant bronze cauldron. This giant cauldron, All Saints Valley once had one. Qin Yongyan didn't have to wait long in the square before a man in a brown brocade robe strode out. This man looked about the same age as him, probably in his 40s, but his tone was slightly arrogant. As soon as he saw Qin Yongyan, he asked impatiently, "Tell me, why are you here?" Junior Qin Yongyan greets Mr. Jiang. Cultivators naturally couldn't be judged by their appearances. Although Jiang Yuankui's attitude wasn't good, Qin Yongyan still bowed respectfully to him. Jiang Yuankui naturally had the right to be arrogant. After all, his age and seniority were much higher than Qin Yongyan's. However, when Jiang Yuankui approached Qin Yongyan, he suddenly realized Qin Yongyan had actually stepped into the celestial being realm, which surprised Jiang Yuankui quite a bit. A junior with the surname Yong should be between 40 and 60 years old, but he had already stepped into the celestial being realm. This kind of cultivation aptitude was rare even in the Jiang family. No wonder this man dared to climb Qixia Peak alone to ask for a meeting. Jiang Yuankui frowned as he sized up Qin Yongyan. Seeing that he didn't answer, Qin Yongyan cupped his hands and bowed. He said directly, "I know that outsiders are not allowed to set foot on Diyu Island. The reason why I came so abruptly this time is that I have a question that I would like to ask Mr. Jiang." "Tell me about it." Because the Jiang family's inheritance was relatively complete, since ancient times, many cultivators had wanted to come to the island to seek guidance. Under normal circumstances, if it didn't involve too many secrets, or if he happened to be in a good mood at that time, the Jiang family's patriarch would answer the question, which could be considered as forming a good relationship with the outside world. As a result, the Jiang family's reputation naturally became more and more well-known. "Thank you, Mr. Jiang." Qin Yongyan bowed again, then slowly said, "I have an only daughter, who entered the ancestral hall at the age of 8 and became Xian Nu. In the blink of an eye, 20 years have passed, and my daughter has married and has children, living a stable and happy life," Qin Yongyan narrated in a calm tone. But when Jiang Yuankui heard the two words, Xian Nu, he frowned on the spot. This was because he had already guessed what Qin Yongyan wanted to ask. Just as expected, Qin Yongyan said some seemingly long-winded words, but in the end, he suddenly changed the topic and said, "My wife is also Xian Nu, so I know very well that most Xian Nu won't live past 40. This kind of tragedy has happened once before, and now it's happening to my daughter again. Let me say something disrespectful to the ancestors. If I could turn back time, even if I had to sacrifice my life, I would never let my daughter become Xian Nu. Unfortunately, it's too late. It's too late to say anything now." Speaking up to this point, Qin Yongyan raised his head and glanced at Jiang Yuankui. Then, with a solemn expression, he said, "This junior has heard that most of the mystical maidens of the Jiang clan will have good endings. Therefore, I took the liberty to visit. I only hope that Mr. Jiang can dispel this junior's doubts and save my daughter who has finally managed to live a good life." After saying this, Qin Yongyan bowed again, very respectfully to Jiang Yuankui. Jiang Yuankui silently looked at Qin Yongyan. After being silent for a long time, he said in a deep voice, "Get up first." Hearing this, Qin Yongyan's face lit up with joy. Just as he was about to thank him, he heard Jiang Yuankui sigh and say, "I'm very sorry." Chapter 345. The sea breeze blew over the mountains and over the treetops, gently carrying fallen leaves to the square outside the ancestral shrine. After hearing Jiang Yuankui's reply, Qin Yongyan's heart sank. He hurriedly bowed and begged, "I have also heard that the Jiang clan's secret has never been mentioned to outsiders. However, this matter concerns my daughter's life, so I have no choice but to treat it seriously. Mister, you are the leader of a clan. If you have any difficulties, this junior can understand. I only hope that sir can give me some pointers and point out a path for my poor daughter. This junior will definitely remember such a great favor in his heart at all times. Thank you for your trouble, sir. After speaking, Qin Yongyan bowed to Jiang Yuankui again. The meaning of his words was very clear. Even if Jiang Yuankui could not reveal it due to the clan rules, he could still give him some pointers. In any case, he could give him a direction to work towards. Then, he could find a solution in that direction. This request did not seem excessive, but Jiang Yuankui did not know why. After hearing Qin Yongyan's words, he responded with an expressionless face. I already said that I cannot help you with this matter, please go back. After speaking, Jiang Yuankui flicked his sleeves and turned to walk back to the ancestral shrine. Sir Jiang, please stay. Qin Yongyan could not help but feel anxious. He could not help but take a few steps forward, wanting to say a few words to Jiang Yuankui. However, at this time, a young man appeared in front of him at an extremely fast speed. Then, he stretched out his right hand and stopped Qin Yongyan. The clan leader's meaning is very clear. Please go back. Qin Yongyan glanced at the young man, only to discover that this young man was actually a diviner-level expert. For a moment, he was unable to advance or retreat. Qin Yongyan's face revealed a look of struggle. After hesitating for a moment, he suddenly bent his knees in front of this young man, and with a plop, he knelt on the ground. I hope that Sir Jiang will be merciful and save my poor daughter. A diviner was actually doing such a thing. This made the young man feel a little surprised, so he could not help but look at Jiang Yuankui, wanting to hear his opinion. Jiang Yuankui stopped, but he didn't turn around. It's not that I don't want to help you, but I can't. Her fate was sealed the moment she became the Siming Xian Nu. Isn't it too late for you to regret it now? At this point, Jiang Yuankui suddenly glanced at the young man and said, Feng Yan, help me see the guest out. Yes, Patriarch. The young man called Feng Yan nodded. Then he reached out his right hand and said to Qin Yongyan, Mr. Qin, please go back. Qin Yongyan knelt on the ground and remained silent for a long time. In the end, he gently shook his head and said in a very lonely voice, Forget it. I have disturbed Mr. today. I hope Mr. won't blame me. I will take my leave now. After that, Qin Yongyan stood up and slowly walked down the mountain. As they walked, they listened to the constant gurgling sounds of the waves. Qin Yongyan seemed to have suddenly thought of something, and a self-mocking smile appeared on his face. He had personally sent Qin Ruoying to the ancestral hall, and now it was too late for regrets. The reason he regretted it was all because of that cheap son-in-law. Qin Yongyan would never forget that day. All Saints Valley. In a small courtyard at the back of the mountain. When Qin faced everyone and loudly shouted, Let's go home, it was like a heavy hammer hitting Qin Yongyan's heart. His voice was as loud as a bell and as loud as thunder. It also made him completely wake up. Qin Yongyan was in great pain as he watched his lover die in his arms, but he didn't understand why he was in pain. Everything about the Siming Xian Nu was normal for everyone in the village. In everyone's opinion, becoming the Xian Nu was always an extremely glorious thing. Even if they knew that the Xian Nu would have a shorter lifespan. Becoming the Xian Nu was the most glorious thing in All Saints Valley since ancient times. Children of 8 or 9 years old were ignorant. If the elders said that the Xian Nu was good, the children would naturally want to become the respected Xian Nu. Until they reached adulthood, until they died prematurely due to the exhaustion of their lifespan. They always believed that being able to become the Xian Nu was their blessing. Everything had been deeply ingrained in them. Qin Yongyan finally understood why he had felt pain in the past. What was the purpose of life? For the current him, being able to see his daughter grow up and live a happy and stable life was the most meaningful thing. As for the rest, it wasn't important. In order to make up for his mistakes, the first thing Qin Yongyan did after becoming a diviner was to seek help from Daiyu Island. Since the rules were set by humans, they could naturally make 1 or 2 exceptions. But unfortunately, Qin Yongyan's ability was limited, and he didn't have enough face. Jiang Yuankui obviously couldn't break the rules for him. He couldn't, but someone else could. Thinking of this, Qin Yongyan couldn't help but chuckle. But there was a bit of loneliness, a bit of unwillingness in that smile, and at the same time, a bit of consolation. He was old, he couldn't take care of his daughter like before. He had taken care of Ying for half his life, but now this responsibility fell on the shoulders of someone else. For a father, this feeling was indeed a bit complicated. But no matter what, as long as Ying could be happy, as a father, he didn't care. Polygonum Ji Gu, Bandit Yi Hao. Mourning for my parents, who gave birth to me. Polygonum Ji Gu, Bandit Yi Hao. Mourning for my parents, who gave birth to me. When Qin Yongyan's figure disappeared from the foot of the mountain, Jiang Fengyan thoughtfully came to the ancestral hall. There were no outsiders present, so Jiang Fengyan directly called out to Jiang Yuankui, "Father." Jiang Yuankui held 3 sticks of incense and stood in front of the ancestral tablets respectfully. After inserting the incense in his hand into the incense burner, Jiang Yuankui turned around and asked, "Is he gone?" "Yes." Jiang Fengyan responded. Then, he said with a confused expression, "Father, I don't understand. What don't you understand? You don't even know this, do you? Qin Yongyan's daughter is called Qin Ruoying. I heard that it was because of her that the All Saints Valley was flattened by Mr. Chen." "So what?" Jiang Fengyan was stunned for a moment. He seemed to be completely unable to understand Jiang Yuankui's approach, so he hurriedly said, "Father, Mr. Chen is above the celestial being. It's completely inappropriate to offend him over a few words, right?" Jiang Yuankui didn't answer. Seeing this, Jiang Fengyan gritted his teeth and continued, "The spirit energy has been surging too much recently. Second granduncle may break through at any time. If we take this opportunity to build a good relationship with Mr. Chen, we may be able to ask him for help. If he's so helpful, why do you have to push him away?" Seeing Jiang Fengyan's puzzled look, Jiang Yuankui laughed and said, "Fengyan, you're oversimplifying things. Let's not talk about your second granduncle first. This Ming Xian Nu is actually not as simple as you think," Jiang Yuankui explained with a smile. However, Jiang Fengyan still couldn't agree with his point of view, so he couldn't help but shout, "Father." He wanted to say something, but Jiang Yuankui waved his hand directly, indicating that he should stop talking. "Just wait and see. If Mr. Chen really cares about that woman, then he'll definitely go to Daiyu Island himself, when that time comes." Chapter 346. Because of Qin Ruoying's illness, Chen Shi had been thinking hard about how to solve it, so he didn't realize that he was neglecting the little one. Since he came back, it was the first time he completely ignored the little one's feelings. Of course, the little one was a little unhappy. "I'm not happy. I'm not happy." So, early in the morning, the little one stuck to Chen Shi and insisted that Chen Shi play games with her. She didn't know why she suddenly became so clingy. Qin Ruoying wanted to take her to wash up, but the little one refused to go no matter what. She even put on a look of disdain and didn't want Qin Ruoying to get close to her. Seeing this, the couple couldn't help but look at each other. Why did this child suddenly start to throw a tantrum? Qin Ruoying couldn't do anything about it, so she had to let Chen Shi serve her. How to serve her? He could only play games with her and make her happy. The little one especially liked to play Fruit Ninja, which was a casual game that was popular all over the world. As long as you cut the fruit on the screen with your finger, you could get points. Although the gameplay was simple, it was very playable. Chen Shi patiently played with her for a while, but the little thing was getting more and more excited. No matter what she said, she wouldn't wash up. Chen Shi had no choice but to snatch the phone from her hand and show her a series of gorgeous combos. Then, he pretended to be careless and deliberately cut the bomb and died. Seeing that her father was so powerful but still died, the little one immediately laughed happily. Seeing that she was finally happy, Chen Shi immediately carried her to the bathroom and helped her wash up as fast as he could. After that, Chen Shi used a lot of effort to make the little one swallow her breakfast. 4 or 5-year-old children were the most mischievous. Even an obedient and sensible child like Nyan would inevitably be mischievous sometimes. So even if she was extra mischievous today, the couple didn't take it to heart. But the more they didn't care, the more this little thing acted up. On the way to the tea house, Chin-shi said to go left, but she insisted on going right. It was as if she was deliberately going against Chin-shi. She was already so pretentious. If Chin-shi still didn't realize that the little fellow was deliberately being difficult, he would be too irresponsible as a father. Thus, Chin-shi squatted beside the little girl, preparing to coax her. However, this little thing proudly turned its little face away and put on a look of not wanting to talk to him. Seeing her attitude, Chin-shi knew the seriousness of the matter. Therefore, he put on a very exaggerated expression, and as if he was performing in a stage play, he imitated Uncle Benchan's northeastern accent and said in a low muffled voice, "What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong with little darling today? Why are you so unhappy?" Looking at Chin-shi's performance, the little fellow suddenly couldn't hold it in. After twisting her small body proudly for a while, she said indignantly under Chin-shi's constant questioning, "I don't like Papa anymore." After that, the little thing made a gesture to push Chin-shi away. Looking at her aggressive posture, how could he let go of her at this time? Therefore, Chin-shi hugged her tighter. "Oh, what's wrong? What did Papa do to make you unhappy? Don't you always say that you like Papa the most and then Mama the most? Why don't you like Papa all of a sudden?" Hearing this, the little thing seemed to suddenly think of something unhappy. She pouted on the spot, and then said to Chin-shi with a stubborn face, "I don't like Papa anymore. Go and play with Mama. Don't play with me." As soon as these words came out, the couple couldn't help but laugh out loud. It turned out that, was his daughter jealous of her mother? Recently, Chin-shi had been sticking to Chin Roying all day, for fear that something would happen to her. Although the little fellow had games to play and the two brothers to accompany her, her father's abnormal behavior still attracted her attention, and she couldn't help but feel a little down in her heart. Papa used to care about her a lot. Papa also cared about Mama, but he cared more about her. The little fellow was now in the sex bud stage, and it was actually very normal for her to have an Oedipus complex. This was a stage that children had to go through in their growth process. It was not a twisted mentality, nor was it a big problem. Because once this stage was passed, they might completely forget that they had a complex relationship with their biological father against their mother. In this regard, Chin-shi naturally had to make appropriate guidance. So after thinking for a while, he looked into the little fellow's eyes and said to her very seriously, "Nyan, do you know? Mama is sick." Hearing this, the expression on the little fellow's face suddenly froze. She seemed to be very surprised, and after hearing Chin-shi's words, she quickly turned to look at Chin Roying. Aunt Zhang's health wasn't good, and she used to have old illnesses from time to time. The little fellow stayed by her side all year round, so she was very sensitive to the word sick since she was young. This was because she knew that once her grandmother fell sick, she would feel very uncomfortable, and sometimes she couldn't even stand up. She had never experienced that feeling, but she could still feel her grandmother's pain from the side. Therefore, every time this happened, she would be exceptionally obedient, and wouldn't cause trouble for Aunt Zhang at all. Now that Chin-shi suddenly said that Chin Roying was sick, it naturally brought back the little fellow's bad memories, so she hesitated for a moment, and then asked timidly, "What's wrong with Mama?" "Mama is sick. Although it's not very serious, there's no way for her to recover in a short period of time." "Oh." The little fellow blinked her eyes, and her expression was a little stiff, as if she didn't understand what Chin-shi meant at all. Seeing this, Chin-shi continued to try to guide her. "When a person is sick, they will become very weak. Does that mean they need someone to take care of them?" This time, the little fellow finally understood, so she nodded and answered resolutely, "Yes. You and Mama are the people that Papa cares about the most. Now that Mama is sick, shouldn't Papa take good care of Mama?" "Yes. But Papa has to take care of Mama, then he won't have time to play with you. Will you be angry?" "No. I'm not angry." Nyan Nyan is so sensible. Muah. Seeing that the little fellow listened to his words, Chen Shi kissed her little face, as a reward. After Chen Shi's reasonable guidance, the little fellow seemed to realize that her previous behavior was wrong, so after hesitating for a while, she signaled Chen Shi to let go of her. After Chen Shi put her on the ground, the little fellow jumped to Qin Ruoying's side, then pulled Qin Ruoying's hand and said loudly, "Mama is sick, we have to take good care of Mama." After saying that, the little fellow looked up at Qin Ruoying and added, "Grandma said that when you're sick, you can't walk. We have to hold Mama's hand and walk." This silly child, just now, he was still cold to her, but now he suddenly became very kind. His face changed faster than flipping a book. Looking at the cute little thing in front of her, Qin Ruoying couldn't get angry even if she wanted to. So she could only smile and rub her head, then rolled her eyes at Chen Shi, as if she was complaining silently, "It's all your fault." Chapter 347. The little girl felt that she had been neglected recently. In order to prevent her from having such thoughts, Chen Shi brought her around Ho-Hai. After playing with her for a while, the family of three slowly strolled back to the tea house. Her mother had become a patient, and the little girl was very concerned about it. So when she returned to the tea house, she didn't even have time to say hello to the brothers before she ran into the bar. She raised her head and asked Xiao Yuan to pour her a cup of hot water. The little girl eagerly brought the hot water to Qin Ruoying. No matter what, she wanted Qin Ruoying to take the medicine first. Qin Ruoying had never been to the hospital, so how could she have any medicine on her? So she could only tell the little girl that it didn't matter and that she would be fine after a few days of rest. But the little girl didn't listen to anything she said. Because in the little girl's mind, she must take medicine when she was sick. Only by taking medicine can she be cured. This was also the idea that Aunt Zhang had instilled in her since she was young. It was to prevent her from being unwilling to take medicine when she was sick in the future. He didn't expect that after leaving Aunt Zhang for so long, the little girl could still remember this. This made Chen Shi feel gratified. It was rare for her daughter to be so filial, so Qin Ruoying naturally couldn't discourage her. So after hesitating for a while, she took a Peiyuan pill from Chen Shi and pretended to take it. Seeing this, the little girl finally felt relieved. Then, as usual, she got together with the brothers and continued to play games. For a child, being happy was the most important thing. As long as she was happy every day, this childhood was worth remembering. Time flew by, and it was almost summer vacation. According to the couple's plan, after this summer vacation, the little girl would have to go to a senior class. The school would definitely be the top school, but it wasn't to force the little girl to be a top student. It was to give her a change of environment so that she could be in contact with more children of the same age. On the other hand, it was also because these three little things had been playing too much recently. If they were left alone, it wouldn't be long before they would fumble around playing Mobile Legends. Playing games was addictive. Children had poor self-control, so it was better to play less. School was obviously the best place to go to rehab. After the start of summer, Ho-Hai became lively again. Enjoying the cool air was different from enjoying the air conditioning, so after Xiao Yuan opened the door, she moved out a few sets of tables and chairs so that the guests could drink tea under the shade of a tree and enjoy the beautiful scenery of the lakeside. It had to be said that Xiao Yuan was indeed very competent as a shopkeeper. The little girl was well behaved and had a sweet tongue. With her efforts during this period of time, she had indeed brought in many regular customers for the tea house. Although they were still in a state of loss, it was much better than before when they couldn't make ends meet. Seeing that the weather was gradually improving, Xiao Yuan bought a string of wind chimes from the internet and hung them on the door curtain. Every time the wind blew, a crisp and melodious ringing sound could be heard. It had a unique charm to it. The small tea house was still the same small tea house, but it was more lively than before. Perhaps it was an illusion, but Chen Shi felt that his current life was like a tranquil lake. It was calm on the surface, but undercurrents were surging. He liked his current stable and ordinary life, so he didn't want to see any changes. Qin Ruoying's illness was an unknown variable to Chen Shi. It had to be said that his sister-in-law came back at the right time. Qin Shueching was also a Xian Nu. When Chen Shi asked her if she had the same feelings, Qin Shueching immediately gave an affirmative answer. But there was something strange. Qin Shueching's symptoms weren't very obvious. Sometimes, the symptoms would disappear without anyone noticing. Chen Shi couldn't help but suspect that it was because the time it took for the soul to return to the body was too short, and Qin Ruoying's cultivation was too low, so there was a normal rejection reaction. But no matter what, as long as a person felt any discomfort, it must be a warning from the body. Therefore, he still had to treat it with caution and pay more attention to it. How to observe? Of course, he had to stay by Qin Ruoying's side all day. Therefore, the person playing chess with Gu Lao now became Qin Ruoying. Although Qin Ruoying's chess skills weren't that good, she relied on Chen Shi's pointers to barely be able to play chess with the old man. Wasn't this the same as slaying Gu Lao's dragon? The three people chatted while playing chess, when the wind chime at the door suddenly rang. Ring ring ring, the sound of the wind chime was crisp and pleasing to the ear. Qin Ruoying subconsciously turned her head to look, and was immediately shocked and stood up. Dad? Why are you here? The person who came was Qin Yongyan. He was wearing a white traditional training suit today. This kind of outfit was particularly eye-catching in Hohai, which was famous for its bars. Qin Ruoying smiled and went forward to greet Qin Yongyan. Chen Shi also stood up and greeted, Dad. But as soon as the voice fell, Chen Shi slightly frowned. Something seemed wrong. Qin Ruoying didn't notice the strangeness. After introducing Qin Yongyan to Gu Lao, she pulled Qin Yongyan to sit on the side and talked. Dad, is this your first time here? I thought you couldn't find it. I just came back from outside. Seeing that you weren't at home, I thought I'd come here to take a look. Okay, I'll call Nyanyan over and let her play with you for a while. After that, Qin Ruoying turned around and was ready to call the little girl over, but was stopped by Qin Yongyan with a smile. It's okay, isn't that child playing happily? Don't disturb her. Okay then, although the father and daughter lived under the same roof, because Qin Yongyan was busy cultivating all day, they usually didn't even see each other face to face. Qin Yongyan rarely came to the tea house, so Qin Ruoying naturally had to accompany him to have a good talk. Since the old father-in-law came, this game of chess could only be temporarily suspended. After Chen Shi excused himself to Gu Lao, he went to the bar to pour a cup of tea, and then sat next to Qin Ruoying. The father and daughter were chatting about daily life. After seeing Chen Shi come over, Qin Yongyan smiled and said to the couple, Today, I actually have something to tell you. Seeing this, Qin Ruoying leaned forward slightly and put on a look of listening attentively. But Qin Yongyan didn't immediately speak, but looked around with a smile. Chen Shi immediately understood what he meant, so he immediately set up a soundproof restriction, and then frowned and directly asked the question in his heart. Are you injured? From the moment Qin Yongyan entered the door, Chen Shi found that his breath was not very stable, so he had this guess. Hearing this, Qin Yongyan didn't hide, nodded and explained with a smile, I had a small misunderstanding with someone before, but it has been solved. At this time, Qin Ruoying on the side finally recovered and couldn't help but exclaim, Are you injured? Where are you injured? Is it serious? Let me see. Qin Ruoying wanted to see where he was injured, but was stopped by Qin Yongyan with a smile. Don't worry, it's just a small injury. How can that be? She, quickly help Dad take a look, don't leave any hidden dangers. Under Qin Ruoying's repeated requests, Qin Yongyan had to stretch out his right hand for Chen Shi to check. Then, Chen Shi found that Qin Yongyan's breath was in disorder because his meridians were injured. For a celestial, this degree of injury was naturally nothing, and he would recover in 2 or 3 days. Of course, the injury was not the main point was the injured person. Qin Ruoying kept asking Qin Yongyan how he was injured, but Qin Yongyan avoided this topic. After a few fruitless inquiries, Qin Ruoying could only pout and sit there sulking. She was already a mother, yet she was still acting like an angry little girl. Qin Yongyan couldn't help but chuckle at her antics. Ying, I came here today mainly to talk to you about some things about your mother. If you don't want to listen, I'll go back first." After saying that, Qin Yongyan got up and pretended to leave. Chapter 348. Looking at Qin Ruoying's resentful look, Qin Yongyan had a different feeling in his heart. In the blink of an eye, Ying had grown up and had a child of her own. So fast, Qin Yongyan sorted out his thoughts. After Qin Ruoying sat down quietly, he said slowly, "Ying, do you still remember when you were young, you loved to ask where your mother went?" "Of course I remember. At that time, when I saw that everyone else had a mother, I couldn't help but feel a little disappointed, so I always pestered you to ask where my mother went." As Qin Ruoying spoke, she couldn't help but look sideways at the little guy. As a mother, she had the deepest understanding of this child's feelings. "It's been hard on you." Qin Yongyan sighed softly. Then, he changed the topic and said calmly, "I didn't tell you before. In fact, your mother didn't die of illness. She died of old age. She didn't experience any pain. She just lay in my arms and quietly passed away." After saying that, Qin Yongyan smiled and made a hugging gesture, as if he was showing her the scene at that time. After Qin Ruoying heard his words, a very surprised expression appeared on her face. She even suspected that she had heard wrongly. Died of old age? Qin Ruoying's doubts didn't last long. Qin Yongyan smiled and explained to himself, "Yes, died of old age. Your mother's health has always been very good. She passed away only because she exhausted her lifespan, but it's a pity that, the year she passed away, she had just turned 36. At this point, Qin Yongyan couldn't suppress the surging emotions in his heart. Gradually, some indescribable and indescribable expressions appeared on his face. There was sadness, reluctance, longing, and at the same time, pain and regret. "After knowing you, there was no one else in the world. Just like going through the sea, how could I have mercy on the rivers? The person has passed away, but the thoughts remain forever." The hearts of father and daughter were connected. Qin Yongyan's heart was filled with a myriad of thoughts. Qin Ruoying's eyes also turned red. The atmosphere suddenly became much more oppressive. Seeing this, Qin Shi gently held Qin Ruoying's hand. Then, he asked thoughtfully, "She exhausted her lifespan at 36 years old. Is there any secret behind this?" Hearing this, Qin Yongyan immediately nodded and replied, "I came to you today for this matter. Actually, Ying's mother, she used to be Xian Nu." After hearing the two words, Xian Nu's eyes. Obviously, she didn't like this name. She noticed Qin Ruoying's strange behavior and gently squeezed her palm, indicating for her to relax and listen to Qin Yongyan first. Xian Nu's status in the village is very high. No matter what wish she has, everyone will try their best to fulfill it, and the reason why they receive such preferential treatment is mainly because most Xian Nu won't live past 40, so this is actually a form of compensation in disguise. After hearing Qin Yongyan's words, Qin Ruoying's face instantly turned ugly. She was already mentally prepared for this. He already knew a little about Si-Ming Xian Nu's problem from Bai Hong. Fortunately, he had already found Ying's Earth Soul, so she shouldn't be like her mother, who had already passed away when she was still young. However, although her Earth Soul was found, Qin Ruoying still had symptoms of dizziness recently. This made Shi very anxious. After all, Bai Hong's knowledge was limited, so he couldn't be sure if Qin Ruoying still had any hidden dangers. Qin Yongyan suddenly mentioned Xian Nu, so he must know something. Therefore, Shi immediately asked, "Is there any solution?" Hearing this, Qin Yongyan shook his head and couldn't help but sigh. "I don't know either. Xian Nu of All Saints Valley has a short lifespan since ancient times. Everyone is already used to this. No solution?" "Not really." Seeing Shi's anxious expression, Qin Yongyan couldn't help but feel happy for his daughter. With such a husband, what more could a woman ask for? However, now wasn't the time to talk about this, so after a slight pause, he continued, "Xian Nu of All Saints Valley has a short lifespan, but there's a place where Xian Nu is an exception." "What place?" "Daiyu Island." Then, Qin Yongyan told Shi all the information he knew. Ming Xian Nu came from the land of legacy. In this world, there was more than one land of legacy. Floating Mist Mountain, Daiyu Island, All Saints Valley, Misty Pavilion, and the Wind Listening and Rain Observing Building. This mountain, island, valley, palace, and building were the 5 great land of legacy left behind by the ancient cultivators. Most of the cultivation legacies circulating in the world now came from these 5 places. Among them, Floating Mist Mountain had disappeared for a long time, and it was hard to find any trace of it. The Misty Pavilion and the Wind Listening and Rain Observing Building still existed, but there had been internal strife in these 2 places, which led to the loss of their legacies. They might not be able to provide any effective help. Therefore, the only place with the most complete legacies was Daiyu Island, which had always been closed to the outside world. In fact, these things weren't much of a secret. Anyone above the peak strength stage would know something about it. Perhaps only hidden experts like Chen Shi, who would rather deal with antis in the wet market than communicate with cultivators, knew nothing about these things. Of course, the legacies of Daiyu Island weren't the main point. The main point was, their Xian Nu had a long lifespan. This was definitely not a coincidence. There must be a way to prevent Xian Nu's lifespan from being shortened in Daiyu Island. East Sea Immortal Mountain, Daiyu Island? Chen Shi repeated this sentence, then suddenly thought of something. After looking at Qin Yongyan thoughtfully, he asked, "You went to Daiyu Island the day before yesterday, right?" But without waiting for Qin Yongyan to reply, Chen Shi continued, minding her own business. "In other words, the injuries on your body are related to the people on this island?" Qin Yongyan naturally knew what Chen Shi meant. However, Qin Yongyan didn't intend to take revenge, so he just shook his head with a smile and didn't respond. "Okay, I understand." Speaking of this, Chen Shi suddenly turned to look at the little girl beside him, then waved at her. The little girl was quite sensible. As soon as she saw her grandfather, she directly threw the phone to the 2 brothers and ran over eagerly. "Grandpa, you're here." After the little girl sat in Qin Yongyan's arms for a while, Chen Shi smiled and said to her, "Nian Nian, Mom and Dad are going on a long trip. Do you want to go with us? If you don't want to go, you can stay at home and accompany me. What do you think?" Hearing this, the little girl jumped up from Qin Yongyan's arms as if she had been electrocuted. Then, she shouted at the top of her lungs, "I want to go. I'll go wherever you go. Don't leave me behind." As she spoke, the little girl felt so wrong that she was about to cry. Seeing this, Chen Shi could only reach out and pinch her little face, then smiled and comforted her, "Okay, okay, okay. We won't leave you behind. How could Mom and Dad bear to leave you behind? If you want to go, we'll definitely take you there." After hearing Chen Shi's words, the little girl's mood suddenly turned for the better. She couldn't help but smile and say, "Then where are we going?" Chapter 349. For a celestial being, it was naturally not difficult to ride the wind and enter the sea. Because the little fellow had to go with them, Chen Shi did not choose to fly directly to Daiyu. Instead, he took the little fellow to Zhonghai by plane and borrowed a yacht from Ning Zhonghua, treating it as a sea trip. A yacht self-driving tour. This made the little fellow very happy. Once she got on the yacht, she chattered non-stop. This yacht was the one Ning Zhonghua used to entertain their family of 3 last time. It had 3 floors in total, and the decorations and configuration were extremely luxurious. Naturally, there was no need to bring any attendants with them on a self-driving tour, so Chen Shi dismissed the staff on the yacht. As a result, there were only the 3 of them on this huge yacht. The sea breeze curled in spirals, and the sparkling waves sparkled. No matter how bright the sun was, it did not have the slightest taste of summer heat. The little fellow knelt on the observation deck on the top floor of the yacht, her small body constantly twisting with the sway of the yacht. She chewed on the fruit Chen Shi had peeled for her while looking at the distant skyline. Her little face was about to bloom with joy. Suddenly, the little fellow seemed to have thought of something. She suddenly jumped into Qin Ruoying's arms, and then said very coquettishly, "Mama, the next time we go out to play, can we bring Wen Wen and Ming Ming along?" They really want to come out with me to play. Hearing this, Qin Ruoying rubbed her head and responded with a smile, sure, the next time we go out, I'll persuade Grandpa. If he agrees, we'll bring Wenwen and Mingming along, okay? Okay. The little fellow laughed excitedly, her eyes full of excitement and anticipation. However, this excitement soon disappeared. When the city's skyline gradually disappeared from the sea, there was only the boundless sea and the boundless sky left. It was difficult to even see a bird. The blue sea and white clouds. On the boundless sea, there was only one yacht moving forward alone. This was a very beautiful scene, but how could a 5-year-old child know how to appreciate it? Therefore, after the excitement passed, the little guy began to feel a little bored and lay on the sofa motionless. When the last trace of patience was worn out and it raised its head to see the boundless sea, the little thing immediately flipped out. Not fun at all. Not fun at all. I want to go back. Looking at her aggrieved face, those who didn't know better would think that she had been tricked by her parents. Qin Shi, who was preparing lunch in the kitchen, heard her shout, so he quickly put down what he was doing and quickly walked to the balcony. It would have been fine if Qin Shi hadn't come, but now that he had, the little thing immediately pouted and looked like it was about to burst into tears at any moment. Seeing this, Qin Shi could only stride forward and pick up the little thing from the sofa. Then, he patiently asked, Nian Nian, weren't you quite happy just now? Why are you suddenly angry? It's not fun here. I want to go back. The little thing's naughty temperament also came out. She twisted her body and kept shouting that she wanted to go home. In fact, she couldn't be blamed for being capricious. After all, the sea couldn't be compared to the mountains. In addition to all kinds of plants in the mountains, there were countless cute animals, but what about the sea? Other than the sea, there was only the sea. The sea was magnificent, but at the same time, it was also lonely. If the voyage was long, even the most experienced crew members could suffer from psychological problems, let alone a 5-year-old child like her. Qin Shi roughly calculated the coordinates given by Qin Yongyan. In fact, the journey wasn't too far. At the current sailing speed, they would probably reach Diyu Island in the evening. Although it was only a 5 to 6 hour voyage, there was no internet or cartoons on the ship. Even if she played with her phone, without the company of the two brothers, the little thing would find it boring to play alone. Therefore, Qin Shi pondered for a while and once again took out his trump card, magic tricks. Nian Nian, how about this? Daddy will show you a magic trick. I guarantee that you'll find it fun. Hearing this, the little thing, who was noisy just now, suddenly quieted down. She looked at Qin Shi eagerly. Needless to say, her little eyes were full of anticipation. It couldn't be helped. After all, Qin Shi's magic trick was already deeply ingrained in her heart. As long as the word magic trick was mentioned, it would instantly attract the little thing's full attention. Nian Nian, watch carefully, Qin Shi pretended to smile mysteriously. After pinching the little thing's nose with his hand, he gently waved his arm toward the sea. The wind was gentle and the sun was bright. The blue sea was as soft as silk. When the breeze hit, there would be a slight ripple on the surface of the sea. It was unknown what method Qin Shi used, but the moment he waved his hand, the originally calm sea suddenly stirred up waves. After noticing the change in the sea, the little thing subconsciously opened her eyes wide. However, before she could regain her senses, countless fish suddenly jumped from the bottom of the sea. Like the legendary fish leaping over the Dragon Gate, countless fish continuously jumped high from the sea. After drawing a beautiful semicircle in the air, they fell heavily into the water. The little thing opened her eyes wide, trying to see the fish's appearance clearly. However, she found that the fish were red, yellow, blue, and purple. The fish kept jumping from the sea, their colorful fish scales shining brightly under the sunlight. At first glance, it was as if a rainbow bridge had been built on the surface of the sea. Because there were too many fish, they kept jumping out of the sea and then fell back into the sea. As a result, there was a splash sound on the surface of the sea. It was as if it was raining, and the sound did not stop. For a moment, the whole world seemed to be lively again. The little thing was stunned. She opened her little mouth for a long time but was unable to say a word. She was very satisfied with her reaction, so he gently patted her and asked with a smile, "How is it? Do you like this magic trick?" "I like it." "Then take a look here." As he spoke, she pointed below the yacht. The little thing stretched her neck and looked down. Only then did she find that there were suddenly many white and fat figures beside the yacht. Dolphins. It's dolphins. The little thing was excited. As a regular in children's picture books, dolphins were like stars in the eyes of the little thing, so she recognized them at a glance. The dolphins in the sea seemed to have heard her voice, so they immediately raised their heads and nodded at her. "Papa. They're saying hello to me." The little thing had never seen such a scene before. She immediately waved at the dolphins excitedly. The intelligence of dolphins was very high. The intelligence of an adult dolphin was even equivalent to that of a 6 or 7-year-old child. Chapter 350. Go up to the 9 heavens to catch the moon, go down to the 5 seas to catch turtles. The sea was lonely because people couldn't see the bustling world below. The fish built a rainbow bridge, and the dolphins nodded at her. Although the trick was simple, it allowed the little girl to see a different sea, and it also calmed her restless heart. Finally, a bright smile appeared on the little girl's face again. She stood on the side of the boat, facing the sun. Her little face was rosy, like a ripe apple, looking especially sweet and attractive. When the breeze blew the waves, the crashing sound of the waves was like the most pleasant accompaniment in the world, accompanying the boat as it gradually sailed into the distance. While Chinshi's family of 3 was busy playing with the dolphins, the distant Diyu Island was also particularly lively. Today was the Jiang clan's Memorial Day. The Jiang clansmen on each island had to come to the main island and line up according to seniority at the foot of Qixia Peak. Under the leadership of the Arbiter of Fate Xian Nu, they followed the clan leader to worship their ancestors. After many years of reproduction and recuperation, the Jiang clan was thriving, regardless of whether it was the main branch or the side branches. If the main island was compared to a county, then the remaining 16 small islands were the towns and villages under the jurisdiction of the county. Today, the Jiang clansmen gathered on the main island of Diyu Island, as if all the people of the county had come to the county. From the dock to the top of Qixia Peak, it was densely packed with people. Qixia Peak wasn't high, and a bluestone road led from the top of the mountain to the nearest dock. Those who could stand on the bluestone road were the direct descendants of the Jiang clan, or the senior members of the side branches. And it was precisely because there were too many people that even the beach that would be flooded from time to time was filled with youthful juniors. On the entire island, regardless of whether they were young or old, there was a large ribbon tied around their heads, dressed in blue and black ceremonial robes, and clasped their hands in front of their chests. As long as the bell at the top of the mountain rang, everyone would bow to the top of Qixia Peak in unison. Dong, dong, the dull and distant sound of the bell continued to ring, startling the birds in the forest and causing them to fly into the sky. They then began to circle around the island. One person bowing might not feel much, but when thousands of people bowed at the same time, it gave off a solemn feeling. It was only when one was in the midst of it that they realized how insignificant they were. And this was the tradition of the Jiang clan. There were a total of 36 chimes. When the last chime rang out, a woman's voice suddenly resounded throughout the entire island. "Now that the ceremony is over, please move to the North Island. Today's banquet will be held there." After hearing this, the solemn scene on the island was no longer as solemn as before. Everyone seemed to have been unshackled. They immediately gathered in groups of 2s and 3s, preparing to head to the North Island for dinner. But then, the woman's voice suddenly sounded again. But this time, her tone was no longer as calm and graceful as before. Instead, it became a little anxious. "Wait. Those of the Yuan generation and above, please wait. The patriarch has something important to discuss with all of you." Hearing this, the people on the island couldn't help but whisper to each other. Above the Yuan generation? That would mean that he was at least a grandfather. Did something big happen in the clan? Because the notice came too suddenly, no one reacted immediately. After the woman urged them again, all the Jiang clan members of the Yuan generation and above turned to climb the serene afterglow peak. On Qixia Peak. Outside the Jiang clan's ancestral hall. During the sacrificial ceremony, people had to keep a certain distance from each other. Now that the sacrificial ceremony was over, the patriarch called everyone over. Naturally, the ancestral hall square was instantly filled with people. Among the people present, the lowest seniority was the same generation as the patriarch, Jiang Yuankue. One could imagine how important the matter the patriarch was going to talk about today was. But, after everyone from the Yuan generation and above arrived at the square, everyone learned an important piece of information from the others. The person who summoned everyone was not the patriarch, but the one who had been in seclusion for many years. Many people even thought that he had died long ago, but there was no funeral. Second granduncle, Jiang Jingqing. Jiang Jingqing's seniority was extremely high. The reason why he was called second granduncle was not because he was the second son, but because he was not of the direct bloodline. The so-called direct bloodline was the descendant of the first patriarch of the Jiang clan. The general meaning was that if a father had two sons, the eldest son could be called a direct descendant, and the second son could only be called a collateral descendant. Then, the eldest son of the eldest son would inherit the title of direct descendant, and the second son would become a collateral descendant. And so on, in order to maintain the purity of the direct bloodline. This kind of thinking might be difficult to understand with the thinking of modern people, but for a large clan like the Jiang clan, preserving the direct bloodline was the most important thing in the clan. This was the clan's rule, and also the ancestral teachings. Of course, from Qin Shi's point of view, these people were actually a bunch of steely straight men who didn't understand genetics. More and more people gathered in the square. Everyone was discussing in low voices, one after another, so much so that the square was about to become a vegetable market. At this time, a woman who looked to be about 40 years old, but still had her charm intact, quickly walked out of the ancestral hall. The woman looked at the noisy crowd and immediately frowned. Silence. The woman only slightly opened her mouth, but her voice was like a thunderclap, instantly causing everyone's ears to buzz. Where is this place? How can you all be allowed to make a racket here? The woman looked around with a cold face, and wherever her gaze landed, everyone lowered their heads and listened obediently. For a moment, the whole place was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Seeing that no one was talking, the woman stood on the steps outside the ancestral hall, as if she was about to announce something. But just as she opened her mouth, before she could make a sound, a white figure suddenly descended from the sky and landed directly beside the huge bronze cauldron in the square. The woman instinctively wanted to scold that person, but when she saw the person's appearance, she immediately bowed and said, "Greetings to second granduncle." Hearing this, everyone looked sideways. Then, they followed the woman's example, turned around and bowed respectfully to that person, and shouted in unison, "Greetings to second granduncle." This scene was very similar to an ancient emperor going to court. After everyone finished speaking, the second granduncle, who was the center of attention, smiled and said, "Everyone, get up. I'm not the clan leader, so why are you so respectful?" "Thank you, second granduncle." After hearing the second granduncle's response, everyone straightened up and looked straight at the ancestral hall. At this time, Jiang Yuankue, who had been staying in the ancestral hall, slowly walked out of the main hall as if he had just heard the noise. Although he was the clan leader, his seniority was much lower, so he had to bow respectfully to the second granduncle like everyone else. "Greetings to second granduncle." However, although Jiang Yuankue bowed to the second granduncle did not respond to him. After the second granduncle looked at Jiang Yuankue up and down, he suddenly seemed to think of something and threw out an earth-shattering sentence. "How long have I been in seclusion? Even the clan leader has changed. Is your father dead?"